Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Shannon Medil. Shannon Medil was born in 1989 in Alberta, Canada. She spent years honing her acting skills. Her journey was challenging, but she was ready to start a new chapter in her life. On November 26, 2014, Shannon auditioned and was selected. But before she could celebrate her achievement, she disappeared without a trace. After a day passed without Shannon returning home, her family's worries grew as no one could reach her. Shannon's family was confused. Not knowing what could have happened, they called her cell phone, sent messages on all social media platforms, and left emails. But Shannon did not respond. Her behavior was unusual and completely out of character. Shannon's family contacted the police, but they stressed that Shannon was an adult who had the right to come and go without informing anyone. However, Shannon's family insisted that this behavior was out of character for her and that a search had to be launched. Fearing that something terrible might have happened, Shannon was the youngest of 4 children. From a young age, she loved being the center of attention and was very creative. She loved to sing and began performing in small shows in kindergarten. Showcasing her acting talent during her school years, ultimately did not complete her studies. Choosing instead to focus on her acting skills, Shannon spent her days attending auditions and interviews, but she was constantly rejected. However, during this time, she found an opportunity in comedy and began performing stand-up, which helped her become famous in 2010. When Shannon turned 21, she attended a party with friends to relax there. She met Joshua Burgess. He was quite different from Shannon, but they quickly connected, and these differences eventually helped balance each other out. The couple enjoyed spending time together, watching TV and playing video games. They shared many interests, which strengthened their relationship. After 4 years of dating, the couple decided to get married. In May 2014, Shannon began planning her wedding. With Joshua's active support, their wedding, attended by only their closest family members, was a joyous event. However, the couple did not seem completely happy. Over the next month, Shannon focused on her acting career, attending more auditions, some of which took place in Edmonton, a city 3 hours north of Calgary, where she lived with her husband. This meant she spent a lot of time traveling between the two places. Shannon has appeared in numerous television shows, voiced audiobooks, and even acted in plays. She has often expressed her belief that great success awaits her in Edmonton. On November 26, 2014, 25-year-old Shannon and her brother Brett had planned to meet at the Calgary Theatre. Prior to their meeting, Shannon had auditioned for a show and she was accepted. Marking a major milestone in her journey to pursue her dreams, Brett was waiting for Shannon at the theater, and he understood how important the event was to her. As the minutes ticked by, his anxiety grew. He couldn't reach her. Shannon ignored his messages. Eventually, he had no choice but to leave. He tried calling her the next morning, but she still didn't answer. Brett contacted their parents, but they were also confused about the situation. His mother suggested that Shannon's work schedule might have changed. She mentioned that sometimes, when Shannon worked the night shift, she would sleep during the day. However, this explanation didn't seem plausible. Shannon usually paid attention to her phone calls because it was important for her to stay in touch and not miss anything significant. To reassure herself, their mother thought that when Shannon woke up in the evening, she would realize she had missed the calls and would eventually call back. A voicemail message was left for Shannon, and her family assured her that they were not angry with her. They just wanted her to let them know she was safe. Unfortunately, she did not respond. Worried that something was wrong, her relatives, including her husband Joshua, went to the police for help. They reported her missing and speculated that she might have been in an accident while traveling to or from Edmonton. Initially, the police were slow to act on their request, but after some persuasion, they began to get involved. Eventually, the police launched a search operation. Hospitals were checked, but no accidents were reported that day. The following days were a blur. Family members anxiously awaited any news. During this time, Shannon did not shop, did not use any credit cards, and there were no activity records on her car. As if she had disappeared, she also stopped using her social media accounts, where she often shared updates about her acting career. Unexpectedly, a few days later, Joshua reported to the police that he had found Shannon's cell phone in her pants pocket at home. He also discovered her car, but the police did not find anything suspicious. Nearly 2 weeks passed without any news until the police found some unusual photos. 2 photos of a girl with her hair covering her face were found attached to a tree in a Calgary park, although the identity could not be confirmed. The girl bore a strong resemblance to Shannon, especially due to her bright red hair. It appeared that a potential kidnapper was taunting the police. Search efforts were organized in Big Sugar Creek, one of Canada's largest parks. Several teams were formed, including volunteers and Shannon's family members, for 2 days. Police scoured a large area, assisted by specially trained dogs and a rescue helicopter that surveyed the park from the air. Unfortunately, these efforts were unsuccessful. It was later discovered that the images that prompted the search were part of an art project created by local university students. Realizing that their photos had been mistakenly taken as evidence in connection with the case, the students contacted the police to clarify the situation. During this time, her family anxiously awaited news, but there were no clues regarding Shannon's whereabouts. It was unclear whether she would ever be found alive. The idea of a kidnapping seemed unlikely, as no ransom was demanded. Nor had the family been contacted. Joshua revealed a previously unknown fact to the police. He explained that his wife had been struggling with her acting career for years. One evening, she called him and confessed that she had considered jumping off a bridge during a particularly difficult time. She had just suffered another disappointment after auditioning for a role in a television series she had hoped to land. Fortunately, she was able to overcome the emotional pain, but she later suffered a nervous breakdown. The police were concerned that such a traumatic experience might have led her to consider end life. Police and divers searched rivers in the area, hoping to find any sign of her. Unfortunately, despite exhaustive searches along the riverbank for miles, they found no clues, and the investigation hit a dead end. By May 2015, nearly 6 months after Shannon disappeared, the police still had no clue as to her whereabouts. During this time, an experienced police officer named Christine took over the investigation, having worked in the homicide division for many years. She was known for her determination and attention to detail. Her previous efforts had led to the arrest of many dangerous criminals, and she was committed to solving this case. Christine decided to investigate those close to Shannon. She wanted to learn more about her husband, Joshua. From the beginning, he seemed like a kind and positive person. He cooperated fully with the police, allowing them to search his home twice and readily answering their questions. He also supported Shannon's family when they went to the police station to report her disappearance. Even after she went missing, the family kept in touch with Joshua, comforting each other and holding out hope. When asked about the possibility that Joshua was involved in Shannon's disappearance, all of her relatives responded that he could never hurt his wife. However, during discussions with Shannon's family about her husband, Joshua, the police made a surprising discovery. The couple had been married for over 7 months at the time of the tragic events, but it was only now, 6 months after Shannon's disappearance, that it was revealed that they had an open marriage. This meant that they were in an unconventional relationship where both Joshua and Shannon could have other partners. Joshua claimed that he proposed this arrangement and that Shannon agreed. Although she did not seem particularly interested in it, Shannon's family was also aware of the arrangement. This arrangement allowed Joshua and Shannon to explore their private lives more freely, especially when Joshua was dating other women. According to Joshua, they had no disputes about their open marriage. Surprisingly, Shannon knew about all of her husband's affairs and had even met some of his girlfriends. Officer Christine discovered that Joshua had had about 7 affairs during their marriage. It was important to interview all of his girlfriends. The police were then able to locate and question them without any difficulty, according to the investigation. Joshua's last girlfriend shared some intriguing details. She continued to see him even after Shannon went missing. This girlfriend revealed information that the police had never heard before. They discovered that just before Shannon went missing, there had been a serious conflict between her and Joshua concerning the openness of their relationship. When Shannon decided to end their open marriage, Joshua's girlfriend stated that to avoid further conflict, he agreed with Shannon's decision. However, a week later, Shannon discovered that Joshua was still in contact with his girlfriend. Despite his promise to end the relationship, she found out because he had locked his phone, which was unusual, as they had previously been free to check each other's devices. When Joshua gave her the password, Shannon discovered that instead of breaking up with his mistress, he had decided to marry her, making Shannon the second person in his life. Joshua claims he is planning to file for divorce soon. Shannon felt deeply betrayed after throwing away Joshua's phone. She carefully considered her situation and made some important decisions, including moving from Calgary to Edmonton. She was in the process of implementing this plan at the time of her disappearance. During this period, she continued to live with Joshua, but they arranged their schedules to avoid seeing each other. Their relationship was extremely strained. Shannon often worked night shifts, while Joshua had a completely different schedule, causing them to barely see one another, according to the investigation. Shannon's life ended on November 27, 2014. After that day, all her banking transactions stopped. She ceased using the internet, and her phone went silent at noon. However, a signal from her phone was detected in an alley in the city the next morning. Joshua later claimed that he had found the phone at home. Interestingly, a few days later, Joshua also discovered Shannon's car, but could not explain how he found it. All of this seemed very suspicious to Officer Christine. Christine decided to speak to Joshua again. Meanwhile, an application to confiscate Joshua's phone had been filed, as he was increasingly considered a prime suspect in Shannon's case. In addition, the police decided to confiscate the car. On June 2, 2015, 7 months after Shannon's disappearance, Police Christine, along with other police, went to Joshua's house. They brought a search warrant to confiscate his cell phone and car. The officers knocked on the door and asked to enter the house. But initially, Joshua did not answer. After a while, he responded to the police and announced that he would be coming out soon. It appeared that Joshua was moving around inside, possibly trying to buy time to hide something. He answered the second police call, but explained the delay by saying that he was looking for his pants. Joshua spoke from behind a closed door and was asked to come out. Regardless of his appearance, the police sensed that something important was happening inside. They were prepared for any eventuality, including the use of weapons. Suddenly, he burst into tears and confessed to killing Shannon. After some persuasion, he finally opened the door. The police entered and saw Joshua bleeding. On the floor next to him was a military knife, which he had used to commit end life. He was rushed to the hospital. Joshua had lost a significant amount of blood, but he was not in critical condition and did not require surgery. The doctors were able to stitch up his wound. A psychiatric evaluation was needed to determine whether he was a danger to himself or others. When Joshua was taken into the interrogation room, he only said that he would confess his love to Shannon if he could see her alive, and he did not say anything else. Meanwhile, the police searched Joshua's home with the help of sniffer dogs. Later, they discovered a body buried in the yard, and during the excavation, they found enough evidence to secure a conviction. However, they still wanted to obtain a confession and hear Joshua's account of the events. On the second day after his arrest, Joshua provided a detailed account of the events on the day Shannon went missing. He returned home and found her sitting on the couch. She appeared very upset and immediately accused him of cheating, calling him a traitor for the affair. In a fit of rage, she lost control and said many harsh words to him. Unable to bear her accusations, Joshua tried to cover her mouth with his hand. In response, Shannon bit him and continued to insult him, expressing her disgust at his attempts to touch her. In a fit of rage, Joshua grabbed Shannon by the neck and began to strangle her until she stopped breathing. When he realized she was dead, he became frightened and was unable to call an ambulance because she was dead. When Joshua recounted this, he became emotional, cried, and clearly felt remorse for his actions. Finally, the confession brought him relief after 8 long months of carrying this secret. During this time, Shannon's body lay in their home. Despite being checked twice by the police, they ignored the containers on the back porch, which were hidden under trash bags to avoid detection. Joshua Burgess was charged with second-degree murder. Shannon's family eventually learned the truth about what had happened, shocking everyone to discover that the killer had been near them the entire time. Even helping to find Shannon, Joshua's trial attracted considerable public and media attention. Despite his remorse, Joshua did not want to make his confession public and refused to attend the trial. Shannon's family believed that he was a coward who did not dare to face Shannon's loved ones. The prosecutor's office and the family contended that it was a premeditated murder and that he was still trying to hide the evidence. He acted as if nothing had happened. Hoping to escape prosecution and punishment at the last minute, the jury found Joshua Burgess guilty of second-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison. With the possibility of parole after 10 years, the family of the Shannon was unhappy with this sentence. They believed that it was Joshua's lifestyle that led to the end of Shannon's life. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Corey Richens. The death of a loved one is a devastating tragedy that deeply impacts family members and children. Each person handles the loss in their own way, trying to deal with the blow of fate. To cope with this shock, Corey Richens, a woman, wrote an entire book. It seemed that she, more than anyone else, understood the depth of what happened. However, as the police delved deeper into the tragic death of a man from Utah, it became increasingly clear that there was more cynicism. Eric Richens was born in 1982 as the eldest of 3 children, with 2 younger sisters, Katie and Amy. He shared a special bond with Katie. The family lived in Summit County, Utah, where they were well known and wealthy, thanks to their cattle ranch. Many buildings in the town still bear the family's last name. Despite their prominence, the Eric were humble and kind, and they were respected by everyone who knew them. Eric grew up on his parents' farm, where he participated in sports and helped with chores. His family was part of the Mormon Church, and religion played a major role in Eric's life. He spent 2 years on a mission trip to Mexico City, where he demonstrated good character by helping the community. Upon his return, Eric attended the University of Utah, where he earned a bachelor's degree in international law. During this period, Eric began dating Julia Jurgensen. They married when Eric was just 20 years old. However, due to their youth and desire for independence, they couldn't maintain the marriage and decided to divorce. After his studies and the failed marriage, Eric saw promising opportunities to start a construction business, which he began to pursue. Eric frequently visited the Home Depot store, where he enjoyed chatting with the cashiers while waiting for his order. During his visits, he noticed a charming cashier named Corey, who was widely considered one of the most beautiful women in town. Eric was captivated by her beauty and secretly in love with her. But he hesitated to ask her out because he was still dealing with the emotional and financial fallout from his difficult divorce. Eric's celibacy continued for a while, but eventually, he asked Corey out, and she agreed. Their first date was filled with laughter and fun. They got along well, and their relationship developed quickly. The couple was truly happy despite their significant difference in social status. Eric was always cheerful and sociable, able to cheer her up on Corey's worst days. Despite the shock from his first marriage, Eric quickly realized that Corey was the one for him and soon proposed. She accepted, and after a whirlwind romance, they got married in 2013. Corey was not only beautiful but also intelligent. She attended her chosen university and earned a bachelor's degree in health management, followed by a master's degree. Corey had previously worked as an administrator at a design agency before meeting Eric in a hardware store. Corey became a new ray of light and hope for him, giving him confidence that he could build a loving family. Corey was born in 1990 in an ordinary family. Corey has an older brother and an older sister. Her father died at the age of 57 in 2010 after struggling with alcoholism. He was unable to witness Corey's wedding, which took place 3 years after his death. Before the wedding, Eric's mother insisted on a prenuptial agreement to protect her son from experiencing another shock like his previous divorce. At that time, Eric's business share was worth about $2.5 million. His mother presented the agreement as a precaution in case of divorce. According to the prenup, Corey could not claim Eric's money, and he could not claim hers. Eric arranged for Corey and partner Cody to be the beneficiaries on his life insurance policy. In the event of his death, Cody could use his portion of the insurance payout to buy out Eric's share of their business. After their wedding, Eric and Corey began their ideal life together. They bought their home, lived happily, and hoped to have children. Inspired by her successful brother who had made a fortune buying, renovating, and selling houses, Corey decided to follow the same path. With Eric's experience in the construction industry, Corey obtained her real estate broker's license and began selling real estate. Her friendly nature and attractive appearance quickly made her a well-known real estate broker in town, which made Eric proud. Eventually, Corey shared her brother's business model with Eric and they began working together. Corey identified profitable properties for resale, Eric managed the renovations, and they sold the homes. Their business flourished until a couple sued Corey for failing to disclose the true condition of a home. The lawsuit was settled out of court and did not affect their business. After 9 years of marriage, they have 3 sons, Weston, Carter, and Ashton. Despite his busy work schedule, Eric values family time, being actively involved in his sons' lives and supporting them in sports. Since 2020, things have been unusual in their relationship. While on vacation in Greece, Eric called younger sister Amy and said Corey had given him a drink that made him feel sick. He suspected she was trying to poison him and warned that if he suddenly died, Corey would be responsible. Although the family was concerned, they dismissed Eric's claims as paranoid because the couple seemed happy. After the vacation, Eric secretly changed his will in November 2020, leaving his business shares and assets to younger sister Katie without telling Corey. The couple continued to live together for another 1.5 years until early 2022. This time, the conflict was over Corey's desire to buy an unfinished mansion for $2 million, which she thought could be sold for $5 million after renovations. Eric is skeptical about the deal's profitability, causing tension between them. Corey accuses Eric of controlling her business, while he believes the investment is too risky. Around this time, Cody, Eric's business partner, was notified by the insurance company that Corey had tried to change the beneficiary on Eric's life insurance policy to her name. Although she was unsuccessful, this raised serious concerns about her intentions. Eric started considering divorce, knowing that Corey would lose everything due to their marriage contract. Eric had already transferred his share to younger sister and removed Corey's name from all documents, including the insurance policy. Meanwhile, Corey spent $1,000 on powerful and dangerous painkillers. On Valentine's Day 2022, Eric told Cody that after eating a sandwich Corey made, he suffered severe respiratory irritation, similar to an earlier incident in Greece. Despite his suspicions, Eric did not leave Corey's side or stop eating her food. Eric continued to be suspicious of Corey, especially after he refused to buy the mansion. On the night of March 4th, Eric, 39, was found dead in his bed. The night before, Corey had made Eric a Moscow Mule over dinner. After he finished drinking it, they went to bed. During the night, Corey woke up to comfort one of their sons, who had been having a nightmare. When she returned to the bedroom around 3 a.m., she found Eric cold and unresponsive. She called 911, saying that Eric had no signs of life and that her attempts to resuscitate him had failed. Paramedics confirmed Eric's death, and Corey mentioned that she had attempted CPR on him, but doctors doubted her story. The man was bleeding from his mouth, but his wife had no blood on her. His death appeared to be due to a drug overdose, as tests showed his blood levels were 5 times higher than the lethal dose. When Corey was asked why he was taking such a strong drug, she said she didn't know. Eric's family denied that he had any health problems that would warrant such medication. A review of his medical history revealed that he had not seen a doctor in a long time and that no one had prescribed him this hard-to-get prescription drug. Eric had no history of drug addiction or convictions and was otherwise healthy. Just one day after Eric's death, a dispute broke out between Corey and Katie. Corey discovers that all of her husband's businesses and assets are legally Katie's, leaving Corey with nothing. This revelation caused Corey to become aggressive, and she attacked Katie, leading to the police being called. Unwilling to back down, Corey filed a lawsuit, claiming that the prenuptial agreement had been violated. She argued that her name could not be removed from the will and insurance policy without her consent. Corey asked for her rightful share and $300,000 in attorney's fees. In response, Katie took legal action against Corey, suspecting foul play in her brother's death and accusing Corey of poisoning her brother for financial gain. Police began investigating Eric's death and suspected it was not an accident. Corey was the prime suspect. During the investigation, police requested access to Corey's cell phone. They discovered that messages with Neil, the salesman, had been deleted, but police were able to recover them. Corey said her husband's death was a huge loss for her, and was especially difficult for Eric's 3 sons, as he was very important to them. Corey played the role of a grieving, mourning widow to avoid suspicion. Police continued working on the case and found another inconsistency in Corey's testimony. According to her story, she went to her son's room at night without her phone, leaving it charging on the nightstand beside her bed. However, records showed that she was actively using the phone at that time, messaging various people. It was even determined that the phone was in motion, indicating she was walking around the house with it. This information did not match her story. The police questioned Neil, the person who sold the medicine and supplied her with the medicine. He confessed everything. He revealed that she had been experimenting with different drugs, claiming that none of them helped with her severe back pain. Little did Neil know that the drugs had an entirely different purpose. In exchange for testifying against Corey, Neil was not charged. During the investigation, it was discovered that Corey had repeatedly taken out life insurance policies on her husband. Immediately after his death, she contacted the insurance company and received $100,000. The day after her husband died, she hired a locksmith to open his safe and took about $150,000 from it. With Eric gone, there was no one to fund Corey projects, and she was also burdened with significant debts at the time of his death. She owed $190,000 in taxes, $1,847,000 to creditors for a mansion purchase, and another $514,000. Corey then wrote a book called You're With Me with her sons. She wanted a book to help her children cope with the loss of a loved one. So she decided to write it herself. After the book was completed, Corey began appearing on various shows to talk about her book. She said that the death of her husband, Eric, was a shock, and she dedicated the book to him and her children. Sales of the book skyrocketed, becoming widely popular within a few weeks. Many mothers bought it to help their children cope with the loss of a loved one. The book's plot was particularly intriguing. In the story, the husband dies from a brain aneurysm. For the Corey, it was a means to secure financial stability since she was in financial ruin. In the book, Corey seems to imply that she did something to her husband, which seems suspicious. Despite everything, Corey profited from her husband's death, benefiting from insurance payouts and earnings from selling a book. She exploited her children's grief for monetary gain. There were also suspicions that Corey might have killed her husband. Rumors suggested that Corey had an affair during her marriage and wanted to be with this man without losing the affluent lifestyle her husband Eric provided. Divorce would have been financially disadvantageous for Corey, so she allegedly killed her husband to get his money. Another motive was Eric's refusal to finance the purchase of a house. 6 months after her husband Eric died, Corey's family noticed that she was preparing a Pinterest folder with wedding ideas. This confused everyone, since all of her friends and relatives were married and no one was planning a wedding, leading to speculation that Corey might be preparing for her wedding to her lover. On May 8, 2023, 2 months after actively promoting her book, 33-year-old Corey Richens was arrested on charges of first-degree murder with aggravated circumstances. She was also charged with possession of a large amount of a controlled substance. The investigation into her husband Eric's death on May 4, 2022, lasted more than a year. Corey is currently being held without bail pending trial. Corey's neighbors and many family members were shocked and could not believe that she had caused her husband's death. Corey Richens gave numerous interviews, presenting herself as a grieving widow who, even a year after her husband's death, had not yet come to terms with the loss. This strategy helped her gain sympathy from television viewers. The interview was broadcast nationwide, causing a significant public response. Corey received significant support and increased sales of her book. She attempted to defend herself by blaming her late husband for past problems with illegal substances, but this claim has never been verified. The couple's 3 children now live with Eric's family, and temporary custody is with Eric's younger sister, Katie. Corey's book could ultimately be crucial for prosecutors in painting Eric Richens' death as a calculated murder with an elaborate cover-up. The judge has scheduled a pre-trial conference for September 23 for the prosecution and defense to discuss jury selection. A trial date has not yet been set. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Kathy Lamb. Kathy Lamb lived in an affluent area of Palm Beach. Kathy had a challenging childhood. Her parents divorced when she was young, and she lived with her father. During her teenage years, her mother was absent, which took a significant emotional toll on her. She was self-conscious about her weight, feeling larger than her peers. Fortunately, her stepmother was kind and supportive. Recognizing Kathy's insecurities, she helped her build her confidence, and over time, Kathy became more confident. She started playing sports and trying to lose weight. Kathy was very smart and kind, which helped her make friends in high school. She was active and cheerful, and her problems seemed to disappear when she was with her friends. One of those friends was Jeff. They met when he was 17 and she was 16, and they quickly felt a special connection. Their relationship continued even after they graduated. 2 years later, they secretly married, surprising their families. When their parents found out, they thought the couple was too young to make such a serious decision, but the couple was determined to stay together, despite family pressure. It seemed like the newlyweds had a bright future ahead of them. Jeff worked hard at a local repossessed car park, while Kathy found work as a pharmacist at a pharmacy. She had the necessary education and wanted to advance in the field. Over the years, Jeff remained a tow truck driver, while Kathy became a top pharmacist. A year later, she was offered a job as a district planner for distributing drugs to pharmacies, an opportunity she eagerly accepted. They achieved their dream of owning a home and enjoyed 12 happy years there until a devastating tragedy occurred. On June 15, 2004, Jeff returned home from work at around 7 p.m. He intended to invite his wife to dinner. However, as soon as he entered, he was horrified to see blood all over the hallway, running down the walls. The gruesome evidence of blood splatter and brain matter terrified him. As he called 911, he struggled to speak and held back tears. Initially, the operator mistook his cries for those of a woman, but Jeff eventually plucked up the courage to describe his home, which now looked like the set of a horror movie. At the end of the corridor, there was a significant amount of blood on one wall, as if it had been splattered. Facing this wall, about 1.5 meters away, similar splatters were visible on the opposite wall, and they extended down the stairs leading to the second floor. On the upper level, in the midst of the gruesome scene, lay 30-year-old Kathy, who was unresponsive. The operator attempted to guide Jeff over the phone to provide first aid, but Kathy's injuries were so severe that there was nothing that could be done. When the police arrived, they were taken aback by the horrific sight. It was one of the most brutal crime scenes they had ever encountered. Kathy's body showed multiple severe head injuries from heavy objects. Her skull and face were so badly damaged that they appeared completely disfigured. Although the murder weapon was not found at the scene, a thorough laboratory analysis determined that it was likely a long, heavy object with a hexagonal shape or similar features. Jeff mentioned that he had tried to call his wife several times after 5 p.m. but received no answer, which he found unusual. Concerned, he rushed home to meet her. It turned out that not only Kathy was injured, the couple had 3 large dogs in the house, Jeff's dog and his wife's 2 dogs. Tragically, both of his wife's pets were discovered badly beaten and lying on the floor next to their deceased owner. They had suffered severe head injuries and were barely alive. Unfortunately, the injuries were so extensive that the veterinarians had to euthanize the dogs to relieve their suffering. In a shocking turn of events, Jeff's dog was found locked in his owner's bedroom. Paws from all 3 dogs were found at the scene, along with blood that police believe did not come from the animals. They suspect the blood may have come from a struggle with the killer. The blood has been sent for analysis to determine its source and whether it can help the investigation, and they await the results. Police are uncertain whether the blood on the dogs came from Kathy or whether they fought with the attacker to protect her, resulting in their fatal injuries. Police found the dogs unharmed after the woman had been killed and the fight had begun. The amount of blood on the animals suggests that they had seriously injured the attacker, possibly lacerating an arm or leg. This means that the attacker would have bled profusely, possibly from an open wound, and that he would have sought medical attention at a hospital. The attacker's intentions remain unclear. He may have acted recklessly or out of a deep hatred for his victim, ignoring the large dogs that lived with the family. After examining the crime scene, the police still lacked any concrete leads. They had to wait for the autopsy results to gather more information. In the meantime, they checked all the local hospitals for the injured attacker. Several suspicious people came in with injuries that were found to be unrelated to the incident, as their injuries did not match those of a dog bite. The police began talking to local residents in the hope that someone had seen suspicious activity at Kathy's home or had noticed the criminal fleeing, possibly injured. Unfortunately, no one observed anything unusual. They were also trying to find a motive. Robbery seemed unlikely given the many valuables in the family's home. Only the gold earrings with diamonds that the Kathy was wearing during the attack were missing, while everything else remained untouched. Even the money, which was clearly visible, was not taken. It seems unlikely that a robber would ignore such an opportunity. There were no indications of a break-in, the furniture was undisturbed, drawers were not opened, and belongings were not scattered about, as thieves typically do when they search for valuables. This led the police to explore alternative motives and various theories. The forensic expert determined that the murder occurred between 4:30 p.m. and 5 p.m. Jeff, the first suspect who found the scene, had a strong alibi. At that time, he was on the job and was seen by numerous coworkers. Additionally, he showed no signs of injuries that would typically result from a struggle with the dogs. Just as police were about to clear Jeff of suspicion, an unknown young woman arrived at the family home. Joy Steele came to the house and introduced herself as Jeff's fiancée, which surprised the police, especially since Jeff had been crying earlier. The police found this an interesting case, as a man who had just lost his wife was being comforted by his mistress, with whom he had been in a serious relationship for a long time. This revelation made the case seem even more suspicious. 7 years into their relationship, Kathy discovered Jeff's infidelity. Despite this, they remained together and did not divorce. Kathy forgave him and even encouraged him to end the affair, leading to their reconciliation and continued life together just before the tragic incident. Police are considering whether a love triangle may have been a motive for the crime. Jeff had a strong motive for killing his troubled wife. That doesn't necessarily mean Jeff killed Kathy himself. He may have convinced someone else to do it. The police discovered a third dog locked in one of the rooms, which was unharmed. This was peculiar, especially given the serious injuries of the other 2 dogs belonging to the Kathy. Did the criminal truly hate her to the extent that he chose to ruin everything she cherished? The police needed to find answers to these questions. In the meantime, one of the police was questioning Jeff's mistress, Joy Steele, at the location of the incident. Joy shared her and Jeff's future plans. They planned to move away after a while Jeff planned to quit his job. Joy had a solid alibi. Joy, who was apparently working at a restaurant during the time of the murder, was present, and multiple people could confirm this. In addition, Joy had no injuries on her body. Although the suspicious couple could not have been directly involved in the murder due to their alibis and their lack of injuries, the police have not ruled them out as suspects given the serious circumstances surrounding the crime. They had a strong motive for their plan. The investigation into the crime and the hiring of the killer continues, with the police focusing on identifying potential enemies or those who may have wanted to harm Kathy. However, Kathy's friends and relatives have been unable to identify any enemies, with the exception of her husband. That same day, another suspect emerged. Jeff had another mistress named Lisa. A few weeks before the murder, Lisa's husband, Ray, discovered them together when he came home early from work and found Jeff shirtless on the couch. This confrontation led Ray to kick Jeff out of the house. The next day, Ray calls Lisa and threatens to kill Jeff if he continues with Lisa. Ray emerged as a potential suspect due to his violent nature and apparent motive. However, the situation raised questions about the Kathy. Why did Ray kill Jeff's wife? She had not harmed him and was actually the victim in the scenario, just like Ray. Despite this, Jeff continued to blame Ray. He believed that Ray had gone to the house to carry out his threat against Jeff, but Jeff was not home at the time. It is also possible that upon arriving at Jeff's house, Ray was in danger from Jeff's wife and dogs, so Ray felt compelled to kill her and the dogs. However, this motive does not fit with the extreme violence the killers showed towards Kathy. Her injuries were extremely brutal, suggesting that this was not a random crime, but an act of deep hatred. The police then turned their attention to Lisa, the second lover. Despite her husband's threats, she remained in contact with Jeff. Cell phone records confirmed that they frequently called and texted each other, including at the time of the Kathy's murder. Lisa and her husband Ray were both investigated, but they had solid alibis and were eliminated as suspects. However, the police decided to track the geolocation data of the lovers' mobile devices to gain more details. The call between Lisa and Jeff took place just minutes after the murder. Jeff's cell phone was found near his home, and Jeff was not at work at the time, contrary to what he had previously said. Additionally, Jeff's dog was unharmed, which seems more than just a coincidence. forensic experts conducted a thorough examination of the animals. They collected DNA samples from the dog's muzzle and paws. Notably, the stains found on Jeff's dog were identified as palm prints. Blood samples taken from the scene were confirmed to belong to the Kathy, indicating that the perpetrator was in the hall with the dog after the attack on Kathy, during which she was injured or possibly killed. Police suspected that the killer's DNA might be on the animal's muzzles and paws. However, the investigation disproved this theory, revealing that the blood was not human, but believed to be from dogs that may have been fighting each other. By analyzing all the new information, police were able to piece together a clearer picture of the events that occurred on that tragic day. Someone entered the house and discovered Kathy along with her 3 large dogs. The attacker hit the woman in the head with a heavy object. 2 dogs were present, also seriously injured and later died. And they did not attack the attacker. They endured the blows without defending themselves. The 3rd dog also did not confront the attacker. Instead, the 3rd dog focused on protecting the other 2 dogs. This behavior aroused suspicion. The police consulted dog handlers for insights. Experts suggested that the dog's lack of resistance indicated they were familiar with the attacker and viewed him as a friend. This familiarity explained why they did not confront him but instead appeared to bite each other. Police found bite marks on the dogs, leading them to conclude that only Jeff, the owner of the surviving dog, could have attacked Kathy. Additionally, geolocation data indicated that the Jeff was near the house, which supported their suspicions. However, the Supreme Court only had circumstantial evidence, meaning they still had a long way to go before bringing any charges. The police needed one crucial piece of information to strengthen their case. With no further clues, the police focused on investigating Jeff's personal life to understand what might have motivated Jeff to kill his wife. It turned out that the family had recently faced significant financial difficulties, which had affected Jeff for many years before these events. Jeff's boss caught him stealing a large sum of money, about $30,000. Jeff had not spent it all and agreed to return it. He also paid his boss $20,000 in restitution. The police then analyzed Jeff's activities. It turned out that his job brought in only a small income, just enough for his family's needs. He also spent money on his mistress. His wife's income was much higher, but he did not want to tell her about his problems. Jeff was characterized as someone without any remarkable business skills. He was neither particularly foolish nor exceptionally intelligent. His earnings were limited, making the compensation amount a serious financial burden for him. Despite living in an affluent neighborhood, he struggled to come up with the funds. Jeff sought ways to earn extra money or secure a loan, but all these efforts proved fruitless, and the total amount of compensation remained far beyond his reach. He later learned that he was the sole beneficiary of Kathy's life insurance policy, which was worth $29,000. Police believed that this amount of money could solve all of Jeff's financial problems. On the day of the incident, police collected the clothes he was wearing at the time. However, forensic experts conducted a quick test and found no blood or DNA from Kathy on his clothes. The suspect was wearing dark clothing, making it difficult to detect any blood stains. The experts meticulously studied every millimeter of the items using a microscope with 60,000 times magnification. Inside the jeans, they discovered several small red drops, which the forensic team identified as blood. This blood had seeped deep into the fabric fibers, suggesting that it was from high-velocity splashes. This evidence was consistent with the nature of the injuries sustained by the Kathy. DNA testing confirmed that the blood belonged to Kathy. The police were further surprised when they examined the Jeff's other belongings. They found a gold earring embedded with a diamond in one of his trouser pockets, which he had claimed was stolen during an attack. This indicated that he likely staged the scene and hesitated to dispose of the item to avoid being caught at a pawn shop. To strengthen their case in court, the police needed to find the murder weapon. Despite their best efforts, the police were unable to find the weapon. It took the prosecutor's office 2 months to establish a clear connection between the killer and the victim. During this time, an employee of the company where Jeff worked discovered a hexagonal crowbar on the roof of the building. The tool was standard equipment on the company's tow trucks and was available to all employees. What made the crowbar suspicious was the significant amount of blood found on it. The employee promptly notified the police of the discovery. Jeff claimed that he had lost his crowbar and was unable to provide it to the police. This raised suspicions that the bloody crowbar belonged to him and may have been hidden as the murder weapon. The crowbar was sent to a laboratory, where experts compared it to the injuries found on Kathy's head. They concluded that the shape of the tool matched the impact marks. Additionally, the blood found on the crowbar was confirmed to be Kathy's through analysis. Jeff was arrested and charged with premeditated murder. Friends knew he had often complained about his troubled marriage. He claimed that Kathy couldn't manage household chores, which made him angry. However, he overlooked that she was the one supporting the family financially and covering their travel expenses, leaving her little time for housework. Jeff's car was always cluttered with garbage, yet he continued to blame Kathy. He frequently talked to friends about wanting to end their relationship, and several acquaintances reported that he was considering divorce. Kathy was unhappy in her marriage to Jeff due to his betrayals and chaotic lifestyle, which she knew about. She often vented her frustrations to friends but couldn't bring herself to leave him because she loved him deeply. Despite her unhappiness, she stayed with Jeff, trying to tolerate his behavior. For Jeff, murder seemed like a better option than going through a divorce. He was in dire financial straits after stealing $30,000 at work, which had severely impacted his finances. If he divorced Kathy, they would have to divide their assets, and he risked losing their home. He felt he had nothing left to lose, as a divorce would leave him with little since Kathy could claim most of their assets. Jeff figured that by committing murder, he could use the life insurance payout to pay off his debts, keeping part of the money to start a new life with his mistress. Jeff had promised to make a choice between his 2 girlfriends, Lisa and Joy, but the decision remained a secret. During the investigation, police uncovered more details about the crime. On the day it happened, Jeff left for work but had actually planned to kill his wife. He drove a tow truck to a gas station, pretending he needed to fill it up. His absence from work was noted, and during that time, he returned home to wait for his wife to return. He was familiar with her daily routine, so he did not have to wait long. In a shocking turn of events, Jeff brutally killed his wife's dogs with a crowbar. The dogs, confused and frightened, began to fight. To stop the chaos, Jeff hit each dog on the head and then took his pet, Netarunu, into a room and locked the door. After the incident, he removed his wife's diamond earrings, intending to make it look like a robbery. He discarded some of his clothes, taking off his shirt and shoes, but he kept the jeans he wore during the massacre, likely overlooking the bloodstains on them. This oversight allowed forensic experts to find tiny drops of blood on the jeans, linking him to the crime. His lover called him while he was near his home, which revealed his location on the phone. When he arrived at the station, he attempted to dispose of the crowbar used in the attack, but did so carelessly, simply throwing it onto the roof of a utility building and not washing it. He believed the tool would never be discovered. Jeff was convicted of premeditated murder due to financial difficulties he thought he could overcome by collecting life insurance from his wife's death. Prosecutors presented substantial evidence linking him to the crime scene, the murder weapon, and the victim. His fingerprints were found on the crowbar, along with Kathy's blood on his clothing. He had attempted to stage a robbery and failed to completely conceal the earrings that were believed to have been stolen. Several people testified about domestic problems. Kathy still hoped to reconcile with her husband, despite being devastated by his betrayal. She truly loved him and was undaunted by his financial difficulties. What she craved most was love and understanding. Unfortunately, Jeff did not want to rekindle their relationship. Instead, he planned a murder that he believed would net him $29,000. It is suspected that Joy, one of Jeff's lovers, knew of his intentions. Jeff promised her a future together, on the condition that she pay off the debt he would incur from his crimes. During the hearing, the defense attempted to portray Jeff as a model husband and a good person, but no witness could reliably substantiate this claim. Jeff had never been a hard worker and showed little interest in his work. He had no motivation to do anything else and did not have a positive reputation in his family life. He was not a good husband, as he had a history of infidelity that his late wife knew about. His lifestyle was well known to friends and family. But it was his wife who suffered the most. When Jeff's efforts to build a better image failed, his attorney changed tactics. He began looking for weaknesses in the prosecution's case. However, the prosecution's strategy was well rehearsed and backed by substantial evidence, leaving little room for debate. The defense argued that Jeff was not the only possible suspect in Kathy's murder, claiming that the police had focused too quickly on him without fully exploring other potential suspects. In fact, police and the prosecutor's office had interviewed dozens of people and considered multiple suspects. Each suspect was thoroughly questioned, allowing police to eliminate those who did not fit the evidence. The prosecution argued that the attacker had two motives. First, he hoped to solve his financial problems through a life insurance policy. Second, he wanted to get rid of his troubled wife so he could live with one of his mistresses. Additionally, he sought to avoid the risk of losing his assets or having to divide his assets in a divorce. The prosecution also argued that Jeff's mistress, Lisa, knew about his plans. She supported him and was waiting for the call to hear about the progress of the crime. Her indiscretion led her to call Jeff, which provided the police with a vital clue. Investigations were conducted to determine whether the mistresses were involved in planning or organizing the crime, but the results were negative. However, it is clear that they supported Jeff, even though they should have reported his bad intentions to the police to prevent the murder. Ultimately, no evidence was found to prove the lovers' guilt or involvement, so they faced no consequences in court. In September 2006, Jeff Lamb was convicted of premeditated murder and sentenced to life without parole. As the verdict was read, Lisa wept uncontrollably in court. Kathy's family believes the court's ruling was fair. In Kathy's mother's opinion, Jeff should rot behind bars for the rest of his life. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lacy Fletcher. Lacy Fletcher was born on November 25, 1985, and spent her childhood and much of her life in Louisiana. She was the only child of Sheila and Clay Fletcher. Her father worked for a non-profit organization focused on the American Civil War, while her mother had previously served as an assistant prosecutor and worked for the mayor. The family was well respected in their community and had strong religious beliefs, but they also harbored dark secrets. In 1995, the Lacy moved to a larger home in Slaughter, Louisiana, a small town where everyone knows one another. Lacy's early years appeared normal. She was a sweet and cheerful child. After the move, she enrolled in a Baptist school, continuing her education until high school. However, she faced challenges with concentration and connecting with her peers, which made her school experience difficult and resulted in very few friends. Despite these struggles, she remained kind and maintained a smile. After finishing 9th grade, Lacy was homeschooled due to multiple health issues. She had been facing challenges since early childhood, with doctors later diagnosing her with autism spectrum disorder and social anxiety disorder. Lacy struggled with these conditions for most of her life. Her parents believed they could find solutions to her problems, but they were unaware of the tragic fate that awaited their daughter. In the early hours of January 3, 2022, at around 2 a.m., Sheila called the rescue service, 911, to report that her daughter was not breathing. During the call, the dispatcher guided her on how to perform first aid. Sheila followed the instructions for artificial respiration, making desperate attempts to save her child. However, Sheila was in a panic and couldn't even answer the question about her daughter's age right away. She mistakenly said Lacy was 31, even though she was actually 36. When the medics and police arrived at the house, they found Lacy lifeless, lying on a leather sofa. This was just the start of a series of shocking revelations. Although the house looked decent from the outside, a terrible stench emanated from the doorway. At 3:07 a.m., police entered Lacy's room. The surroundings were in a frightening state of disarray, filled with insects and rodents. Sheila's was so wretched that it was hard to determine Lacy's age. Her parents were unsure but believed she was 31. She was eventually identified as a young woman thought to be between 24 and 48 years old. It appeared she had spent an extensive amount of time sitting on the couch, creating a shape resembling a crater. This indentation had collected dirt and waste, and she had remained nearly immobile in that spot. The room was filled with a horrendous odor, a mix of excrement and urine along with waste from the insects and rodents. Lacy's condition suggested that she had been in this place for an extended period. Her legs were curled beneath her due to the accumulation of waste, and her limbs were severely decayed, nearly to the bone. The police noted deep ulcers and signs of possible tissue infection on her body, which was very dirty. Her hair was severely tangled, indicating it hadn't been washed or combed in a long time. Additionally, her face was marked with red spots that were difficult to identify at first glance. An autopsy revealed that Lacy's stomach contained only candy and foam and residue from cleaning products. Similar foam and liquid were found on the sofa, along with evidence that Lacy may have tried to eat the cleaning products because she was hungry. Next to the sofa was a gray chest of drawers with a pile of neatly folded clothes. The room also contained a portable toilet and a black chair a few meters away from the sofa, which contained various medical supplies, talcum powder, and bottles. According to police, the girl's death was the result of neglect of her health. Police believe Lacy did not receive the proper care she needed and was unable to care for herself due to her physical or mental health issues. The medical examiner identified a number of health issues, including severe chronic ulcers, bone infections, malnutrition, and sepsis. These conditions led to Lacy's tragic and painful death. After investigation and discussion with her parents, it was discovered that Lacy had been sitting on the same couch for approximately 12 years. After her death, her mother posted on social media, "Mom and Dad love you so much." On January 18, 2022, Clay and Sheila were interviewed by police. They explained that Lacy's problems began long ago due to her health issues. Initially, Lacy refused to leave the house, then her room, eventually moving to the living room, where she found the most comfort. To accommodate her needs, her parents renovated the room, bought a large leather sofa, installed a toilet, and provided her with everything she needed to care for her. They brought her food and care, but her condition continued to deteriorate. Lacy became increasingly afraid to leave the couch, forcing her to urinate on herself or on the floor, sometimes using a towel. During the summer, her mental health continued to decline. Although her parents suggested moving to a psychiatric clinic, Lacy resisted the idea and chose to stay in her room. Lacy's parents maintained that she never complained about her health problems over the years, even as her injuries worsened. Sheila herself maintained that Lacy had not been neglected or harmed. Her mother maintained that Lacy had always been under the care of a doctor. However, when police spoke to the doctor, they discovered that Lacy had not seen a doctor since 2010. She did not report any pain or health problems, and the doctor did not visit her at home, leaving him unaware of her true condition. In fact, Lacy last visited the medical center in 2010. Although Lacy needed to be hospitalized, her parents refused, saying she did not want to go there. After that, Lacy's health rapidly declined. Her parents said that, in the fall of 2021, Lacy began to have nutritional problems and began to eat significantly less. On the evening of the incident, around 10 p.m., Sheila checked on her daughter before going to bed and found Lacy unresponsive. She had fallen to her left side with her legs crossed under her body and was no longer able to straighten her body. After the police arrived, they suspected that the parents had acted inappropriately. They believed that Sheila and Clay deliberately left their daughter on the couch, ignoring her needs and failing to seek medical help. For 12 years, she suffered and lived in her own waste until her death on January 3, 2022. In May 2022, Clay Fletcher, 65, and his wife Sheila, 64, were charged with second-degree murder. The couple was arrested but later released on bail, returning to the same house where Lacy had endured terrible suffering for more than a decade. This decision sparked significant controversy. The judge justified it by stating that the parents had no prior criminal record and posed a low flight risk. Thus, they were allowed to await trial in the community. In early 2023, the court dropped the charges, but prosecutors continued to seek a connection between Lacy's death and her parents' neglect. The prosecutor argued for second-degree murder charges, claiming they did nothing to help their daughter. Lacy's parents were her main caregivers, responsible for her well-being. On June 19, 2023, they faced new charges for the same offenses. They were arrested but quickly released on bail. This incident gained significant attention in the local community and received extensive media coverage. Journalists reached out to the parents, who shared the emotional pain they had experienced for years while witnessing their daughter's depression, feeling helpless to change her situation. Police suspect that Sheila and Clay's statements were an attempt to portray themselves as grieving parents to avoid legal consequences. Under state law, they could face second-degree murder charges, which could result in life in prison depending on the circumstances. Police believe the couple's actions contributed to Lacy's death. People started noticing that Lacy showed clear signs of autism, which was later confirmed by medical professionals. As a result, her development began to lag behind that of her peers. By the time she reached 17 or 18 years old, she occasionally invited friends over to watch children's cartoons. However, her childlike interests caused her social circle to shrink over time. Around 2007, Lacy stopped going outside altogether. During this time, one of the neighbors became concerned and asked her parents about her situation. Sheila, Lacy's mother, reassured the neighbor that everything was fine. Nevertheless, due to Lacy's condition, she was reluctant to go outside and tried to avoid strangers. After this conversation, the neighbor did not bring it up again. The situation began to deteriorate quickly around 2010 when Lacy became largely inactive and even soiled her living area. Officers reported feeling an overwhelming disgust, which they described as the worst they had ever experienced. The foul smell in the Fletcher home was so overwhelming that one officer could not eat normally for nearly a week after responding to the incident. The stench lingered in his mind. This reaction was particularly surprising because the detective had dealt with very gruesome cases in his career, including investigations into killers who sold body parts. He stated that Lacy's living conditions were far worse than anything he had ever encountered. While the Lacy claimed they had long adjusted to and lived peacefully in such an atmosphere. Those who knew the family never saw any unusual behavior from their parents. For years, the couple seemed like a typical family struggling with the hardships of their sick daughter. Although some witnesses described them as somewhat reserved, No one suspected that they were deliberately letting their daughter's condition worsen. This led to questions about the girl's health in isolation, with some even suspecting underlying mental health issues. Her parents claimed that doctors had diagnosed their daughter with locked-in syndrome, a rare condition that leaves a person almost completely paralyzed except for eye movement. Patients suffering from this disorder are entirely bedridden and reliant on caregivers, yet they can still feel everything and communicate through their eyes. Strangely, there was no such diagnosis recorded in Lacy's medical files, despite her parents' claims. The girl was only diagnosed with social anxiety disorder and autism spectrum disorder. There was no evidence of locked-in syndrome, but that doesn't explain why Lacy spent years on the couch. Additionally, foam from a hygiene product was found in her stomach, suggesting she could feed herself but didn't appear to be fed. This begs the question, if Lacy's parents really wanted her dead, why did they call the emergency services? Furthermore, they didn't bother to clean the house to hide any signs of neglect. The situation seems absurd. Many neighbors did not even know they had a daughter. The mother and father had the opportunity to discreetly dispose of her body without raising any suspicion. No one looked for her, as she had no friends due to her significant developmental delay. Despite the apparent apathy surrounding the Lacy family, they chose to contact the police rather than dispose of any evidence, allowing police to investigate the room where Lacy had been suffering for years. From the start, Sheila and Clay denied any wrongdoing. Meanwhile, the police focused their investigation on proving that the parents were responsible for Lacy's suffering. But did they intentionally create an environment where Lacy was locked in her own room? The poor living conditions and the parents' calm demeanor raised suspicions. Furthermore, why would Lacy use sanitary products and lick foam off a dirty couch if she wasn't hungry? Police interpreted this as evidence that Lacy had been starved, while her parents insisted that her actions were due to mental health issues. Sheila and Clay told police that Lacy did not want to communicate or share her struggles with others. This could be seen as an attempt to avoid bothering strangers about her troubles. They claimed that Lacy had been dealing with various health issues for years, a sensitive subject that most people would rather keep private. The prosecutor's office suspected that the villains deliberately hid information and mocked Lacy without intervention. The victim had never complained about pain, likely feeling embarrassed in front of the police. Forensic experts found severe ulcers on her limbs, with flesh rotting down to the bones, which would have caused her intense, constant pain. Under such conditions, she would have been unable to endure the pain without strong medication. However, her parents claimed they never heard her complain, and the neighbors had not noticed any sounds coming from the Lacy household. The lack of noise is understood to be due to the distance between the two homes. Forensic experts have found discrepancies in the parents' accounts. They claim to have discovered their daughter's death at night and contacted the police immediately, but the medical examiner later determined that she had been dead for more than a day. Despite these discrepancies, the parents continued to refer to their daughter's disability and denied any role in the alleged abuse. Sheila told police that she frequently entered her daughter's room in the mornings to care for her by treating her wounds, feeding her, and looking after her. However, this claim was proven false since no food was found in Lacy's stomach. Sheila explained that she tried to keep the room clean but struggled because Lacy was uncommunicative. Her testimony contradicts the medical examiner's report on the time of death. This raises important questions about motive. If the parents were truly guilty, why did they call the police? Why did they subject their daughter and themselves to years of torture while living in such horrific conditions? Police believe that the mother and father might not fully grasp the seriousness of their daughter's mental health issues. The parents insisted on maintaining Lacy's common sense and cognitive abilities, despite the medical professionals' warnings that, due to her identified disorders, Lacy couldn't fully understand her circumstances. Some have suggested that Clay and Sheila may have suffered from mental disorders that made it difficult for them to understand their actions. However, they were well-respected members of the local community and had not aroused suspicion up to that point. Witnesses did not describe them as having such problems, and it was unusual for 3 family members to suffer from mental illness at the same time. Sheila's defense attorney initially succeeded in getting the charges against her dismissed. However, the charges were refiled on June 19, 2023. On February 1, 2024, the district attorney announced that Clay and Sheila would plead guilty to manslaughter. On February 5, the prosecution decided to seek the maximum sentence of 40 years in prison. A hearing was scheduled for March 20. A key moment in the hearing was the testimony of the police who were the first to arrive at the scene. They described seeing Lacy Fletcher in a horrific scene. They described the smell as a horrifying mix of rotting flesh and human and animal waste. The parents, who should have been protecting Lacy, transformed their home into a nightmarish environment. Lacy's legs were bent under her body and remained in that position for an extended period, leading to not only decay in her flesh but also stiffness in her muscles and ligaments. Just imagine the pain and discomfort she must have endured. Naturally, she couldn't stay quiet and had to scream from her pain and suffering. Sadly, it remains unclear how they were able to silence her. The investigation revealed that shortly before her death, her parents had gone on vacation for a few days, leaving her alone. She had no food or water and was unable to move due to her health condition. The only food she had was a peppermint candy, which was found in her stomach during the autopsy, suggesting that this was not enough to satisfy her hunger. In desperation, she may have lost consciousness and ingested detergent. Forensic experts confirmed that the cause of death was septicemia caused by decomposing flesh. For many years, Lacy endured horrific and unsanitary living conditions, accompanied only by insect larvae and mice. Witnesses described the extreme neglect and cruelty exhibited by her parents. They were so indifferent to her well-being that they couldn't even remember her age when they called emergency services. During the call, the dispatcher instructed them on how to perform first aid. Sheila attempted artificial respiration, and it seemed that Lacy briefly regained consciousness as the operator heard sounds coming from her. However, later investigations by police revealed that this was likely a ruse to mislead the dispatcher into believing the couple was genuinely following his advice. In fact, resuscitation was impossible. Lacy had died the day before. Gradually, people begin to accept the situation, but it's important to note that this isn't a mental disorder. Sheila and Clay attempted to persuade the judge to give them a more lenient sentence, arguing that they had endured many years of suffering due to their daughter's condition. After 18 months of maintaining their innocence, the couple ultimately decided to plead guilty to manslaughter, likely in hopes of receiving a lighter sentence from the Supreme Court. The events shocked the local community, particularly the church members who knew Sheila and Clay. Many were taken aback by how calm the couple appeared despite the horrific circumstances. For 12 years, their daughter suffered in their home while Sheila, Clay managed to remain composed. Despite the prosecution's strong case, some community members continued to support the family. The defense team maintained that Sheila and Clay were innocent, portraying them as loving parents who supported their daughter until the end. The mother claimed she fed and bathed her daughter daily, although the daughter typically refused food in her final months. She also stated that she visited every day and sometimes slept on the couch next to her daughter, which she described as a peaceful experience. However, this claim raised suspicions, as the mother appeared well-groomed and it seemed unlikely she could sleep in a filthy environment filled with waste and insects. The prosecution requested a 40-year prison sentence, with many supporters arguing that the couple should be imprisoned for life, as they would not suffer like their daughter did. The court eventually sentenced Sheila and Clay Fletcher, who who were responsible for caring for Lacy for the past 12 years to 20 years in prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Yarborough. Sarah Yarborough was born on June 12, 1975, in Portland. Her family soon moved to Federal Way, a suburb near Seattle. Sarah had 2 siblings and shared a special bond with her youngest brother. From an early age, she loved music and ballet. She was dedicated to her studies, aiming to get into a good university. Her academic success allowed her to visit New Zealand twice through a school program. She later became a cheerleader at her high school and had many friends. Sarah was admired for her kindness and readiness to support those in need. On the morning of Saturday, December 14, 1991, 16-year-old Sarah was supposed to meet her cheerleading team for an event. They planned to gather at the school, where a bus would pick them up. Sarah drove her father's car to the school but arrived an hour early. She mistakenly thought the bus would arrive at 8 a.m., but it was actually scheduled for 9 a.m. As her friends arrived, Sarah was nowhere to be found. Some students noticed her car in the parking lot, but she wasn't inside. When the bus arrived, Sarah still hadn't appeared. Her friends found this puzzling, but since they didn't have mobile phones back then, they couldn't contact her. At the same time, 2 12-year-old children were exploring the wooded area behind the tennis courts on the school grounds. They noticed something unusual. A man emerged from behind the bushes and walked away in the opposite direction. Although the children found this odd, they didn't think much of it and continued walking. A few meters ahead, they came across a horrifying sight, a young woman lying unresponsive on the ground. They feared she might be dead. The children ran home to inform their parents. One of the parents returned to the scene with them, while the other child's father decided to follow the suspicious man they had seen earlier. The child reported seeing a car similar to a Chevrolet Nova leaving the area. Since he lived close to the school, his father decided to look for that car. He briefly spotted a similar car but quickly lost it and couldn't find it again. Meanwhile, the other child's parents went to the school and saw that the young woman on the ground was likely dead. They immediately rushed into the school to call the police. When the officers arrived, they confirmed that the young woman had indeed passed away and identified her as Sarah. Based on the marks on her neck, they concluded she had been strangled. Some of her belongings, such as her jacket, underwear, and socks, were found near her body. Oddly, her purse and car keys were found in the school parking lot, suggesting that her attacker may have assaulted her near her car and then dragged her behind some trees. The body was handed over to forensic experts, and the police started their search for clues. Their first step was to interview everyone who was on the school premises and nearby. 2 kids who found Sarah gave a description of the man who came out from behind the bushes near her body. They described him as a tall guy, around his 20s, with shoulder-length reddish hair, wearing a dark coat and black pants. Soon, the police managed to find another witness, and this is where a surprising twist in the story unfolds. According to the man, he went for a run and noticed something unusual in the woods. He saw a girl lying near the bushes with a man standing over her. At first, the girl didn't move, and the man thought they were a couple being intimate. A few minutes later, running back the same way, he saw both of them still there. He didn't think a serious crime was happening. The man later told the police he had recently moved to the United States and wasn't familiar with typical behavior in the country. However, he was able to give a rough description of the man, which matched what the children who found the body described. Investigators spoke with many people who had been near the school but did not uncover any new leads. Meanwhile, medical experts examined Sarah's body and determined that she died from strangulation. It seems the attacker used his own socks, and they also found a severe wound on her. Experts believe the blow made her lose consciousness, matching the runner's report of seeing her lying still on the ground. In 1991, forensic experts examined Sarah's clothing and found traces of male hair on most of her clothing. However, there wasn't a DNA database available to compare these samples, so investigators could only make direct DNA comparisons with specific suspects. Detectives identified another lead in the case. Although forensic experts found male DNA on Sarah's clothing, the forensic doctor confirmed there were no signs of sexual assault on her body. With this information, investigators developed a theory about what happened. Sarah arrived at the school nearly an hour early and was alone in a parking lot. It is believed her attacker saw her, waited for her to get out of her car, then hit her on the head with an object, knocking her unconscious. He then dragged her behind some trees, where her body was later found. The attacker removed some of her clothing, committed indecent acts, and then strangled her with her own socks. When one of the children who found Sarah's body mentioned a car in which the attacker supposedly escaped, detectives started looking for a Chevrolet Nova. They found such a car quickly, but the driver was just delivering donuts that morning. He gave a DNA sample, which did not match the DNA on Sarah's clothing. It seems the children just noticed the vehicle driving nearby and mistakenly believed the perpetrator was inside. None of the children could definitely recall seeing a man coming from the bushes to a car. In the following days, police officers continued to search for witnesses and new leads, but no significant progress was made. Classes resumed on Monday despite the recent tragedy. The murder had occurred just a few meters from the school, and the perpetrator was still at large with an unknown identity. The girls were scared to walk alone near the school, so boys from the sports teams decided to escort each female student to their car or bus to ensure they weren't left alone on the street. Investigators discovered there were about 70 potential witnesses at the school and nearby that morning. They interviewed each one, but no new information came to light. Using statements from the two children in the runner, a sketch of the attacker was made and shared with all local newspapers and TV stations. The story gained significant media attention, resulting in the police receiving hundreds of tips in the following weeks. Investigators thoroughly followed up on each tip, but none led to any breakthroughs. At one moment, they found a potential suspect who resembled the attacker's description and had a criminal history. However, this lead also proved fruitless because the suspect's DNA did not match the sample from the victim's clothing. The case remained inactive for months. The police received 4,000 tips and tried to follow up on each one, but the local police department didn't have enough resources to manage all the information. Additionally, time was against them because new cases demanded the investigators' attention every month. When Sarah's family found out that the police didn't have enough resources to handle all the tips, they decided to help in any way they could. One family member worked for a technology company and persuaded the company to lend the police department a powerful computer worth $150,000, which was a lot of money in the 1990s. The company agreed, and the police used this computer to store all the tips in one place, process them quickly, and organize them for easy access. Unfortunately, despite their efforts, each tip went nowhere, and there was no progress in the following years. 2 years later, Sarah's classmates graduated. Before their graduation, they decided to honor her by raising a substantial amount of money to build a memorial. This memorial was a bench with Sarah's belongings cast in metal. Next to these items, there was a photo of her dog reaching for her purse. Over the years, the case was occasionally reopened, and all available evidence was re-examined, but the outcome remained unchanged. The perpetrator was still not found. During this time, the police interviewed several thousand people and collected DNA samples from nearly 300 potential suspects, but all efforts were unsuccessful. In 2011, 2 decades after the murder, a detective decided to use modern technology. He learned about a company specializing in genetic genealogy. The detective reached out and asked if they could find relatives of the person whose DNA was found on the victim. The experts accepted the challenge, but they were unsuccessful. At that time, genetic genealogy was in its early stages, and the experts faced limitations in what they could do. For example, they were unable to search for both male and female relatives within the same sample. If they had a man's DNA, they could only look for connections with other men, and the same applied to women. Additionally, they encountered legal challenges due to laws that restricted using genetic data samples to identify relatives of suspects. Nonetheless, their efforts produced some interesting outcomes. The detectives contacted a research team that had been working for years on mapping the genetic lineage of the first people who arrived in the United States from Britain on the Mayflower in 1620. After analyzing the DNA of Sarah's attacker, they found he was related to one of the ship's passengers, Robert Fuller. However, tracing him through this lineage was almost impossible, particularly given the challenges of those times. While the Mayflower carried just over 100 passengers, their descendants now number more than 25 million. Secondly, the detective didn't realize that he had turned Sarah's case into the first of its kind. Although his initial attempt was unsuccessful, it was the first crime to be attempted to solve with the help of genetic genealogy. The detective tried to use the available information and track down several men with the last name Fuller who lived in the area of the city at the time of Sarah's murder. He found photos of them and met with the only witnesses, a jogger and two men who had found the body when they were kids. Unfortunately, none of them recognized the killer in the photos. The detective retired in 2017, and a new team of investigators took over the case. They contacted the company that had been analyzing the DNA sample from the assailant since 2011. By that time, DNA analysis technology had improved significantly, and the experts agreed to attempt to trace the assailant's ancestry. It took them 2 years of meticulous work using public databases to identify even distant relatives of the assailant. They then manually traced these relatives' family connections to people who lived around the time of Sarah's death. In total, they had to rule out several thousand people before finally making a breakthrough. In September 2019, investigators identified 2 new potential suspects, brothers Edward and Patrick Nicholas, who were found to be descendants of Robert Fuller through DNA evidence. Experts concluded that a DNA sample from Sarah's clothing likely belonged to one of these brothers. At the time of the murder, Edward was 33 and Patrick was 27. The older brother, Edward, had a long history of violent crimes and had served time in prison. His DNA was already in the FBI database, so he could not have been involved in Sarah's murder. If he were the perpetrator, his DNA would have matched back in the 1990s. The younger brother, named Patrick Nicholas, had also been arrested several times by the police for violent crimes, including those against minors. However, this happened before DNA samples from those criminals were added to the database. The detectives put the man under surveillance immediately. Patrick lived in a neighboring city called Wellington. The police had been following him for 2 days, and soon an opportunity arose. One day, Patrick went to the laundromat, and while waiting for his clothes to wash, he stepped outside to smoke and threw a cigarette butt on the ground. An officer quickly collected it in an evidence bag and returned to his car. When Patrick stepped out to smoke again, a cloth handkerchief fell from his pocket. The officers picked it up, deciding to keep the handkerchief as a backup in case experts couldn't extract a DNA sample from the cigarette butt. The forensic experts successfully collected samples from all the items. The next day, they informed the detective that Patrick's DNA perfectly matched the traces found on Sarah's clothing from 1991. The judge quickly issued an arrest warrant for the man, and the police detained him. It took investigators 5 days to confirm his identity before they formally charged him with murder. When his background was leaked to the media, Many questioned why someone with such a criminal history had not been considered a suspect for the past 28 years. At 19, Patrick Nicholas approached a young woman, got into her car, and attempted to assault her. The victim managed to escape by jumping into a river and swimming a long distance to reach safety. He has a criminal record. Patrick served a 4-year prison sentence before being released. In 1994, he was arrested again for attempting to assault a minor. Although he was detained, his DNA was not entered into any database. This was because the charge at the time was not considered serious enough to warrant DNA collection, and the police did not encounter his name for 30 years. Additionally, he was not mentioned in any of the 4,000 leads generated over the years. Genetic genealogy experts couldn't link him to Robert Fuller because Patrick's biological lineage had been adopted, and he grew up with a different surname. One of the men who found Sarah's body as a child in 1991 immediately recognized Patrick as the killer. He confessed that the event had profoundly impacted him, especially since he was only 12 years old when they found the body and the killer had seen him. For years, he lived in fear that the murderer might come after him. It wasn't until Patrick was arrested that he finally felt safe. Patrick's trial started in 2023. He claimed he was innocent, and his lawyer tried to dispute the main evidence, which was DNA. The lawyer argued that finding Patrick's DNA on the victim's clothing didn't prove his guilt, but this argument was dismissed. The lawyer also questioned the accuracy of the DNA analysis, but experts deemed this challenge baseless. In the end, Patrick was convicted of first-degree murder without premeditation. On May 25, he received a sentence of 45 years and 8 months in prison, making it almost impossible for him to be released. During the sentencing, Patrick showed no emotion, unlike Sarah's family. Her family spoke before the judge, expressing gratitude to everyone involved in the trial and the investigators for bringing the killer to justice after 28 years of evasion. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of McKenzie Sharilla. McKenzie Sharilla was born in August 2004 in Strongsville, Ohio. The youngest of 3 children, McKenzie received a lot of love and pampering from her parents, John Sharilla and Natalie Stevens. Her parents prioritized her education and encouraged she to pursue every goal she loved. Being the youngest also gave her a tolerance. She was often forgiven for many of her mischievous pranks during her childhood, and even when she committed some more serious mistakes, she would still be forgiven by her parents. McKenzie grew up as a spoiled and entitled girl who often got her way. Her parents gave in to her demands, which led her to believe she could act however she wanted without consequence. As a young child, she was kind and friendly, but as she grew older, her behavior and character began to deteriorate. If things didn't go her way, she would throw tantrums, lose her temper, and use bad language. She was prone to physical altercations and would often disregard others. McKenzie only cared about her own opinions and desires, insisted on getting her way, and prioritized her own interests above all else. During his teenage years, McKenzie became very difficult and unbearable personality, but her parents never thought it was out of the ordinary. To them, her behavior was a normal part of growing up and a phase she would eventually outgrow. They chose to respond with understanding and patience. However, McKenzie's behavior worsened over time. In high school, she started using alcohol and occasionally experimenting with illicit drugs, often managing to avoid consequences for her actions. Her reckless behavior not only endangers herself but also the people around her. McKenzie's parents seemed to be unaware of, or possibly chose to ignore, the obvious issues their daughter was facing. Like many teenagers, she was glued to her smartphone and frequently posted provocative photos and comments on social media. Her actions weren't unusual among her friends, as they often engaged in vandalism, fought, stole, and had run-ins with the police. However, they rarely faced serious consequences, typically receiving only warnings and educational discussions, which may have led them to believe that they could act as they pleased without facing repercussions. Dominic Russo, a young man from Strongsville, was a stark contrast to McKenzie. Born in September 2001, he was the fourth of 7 children to Frank and Christine Russo. Growing up, Dominic was close to his 3 brothers and 3 sisters. He was an exemplary student, actively participated in sports, and prioritized a healthy lifestyle. Throughout his childhood, Dominic excelled academically, participated in sports, and prioritized a healthy lifestyle. Despite being part of a large family, Dominic and his siblings never lacked parental love, attention, or care. Frank and Christine Russo were moderately strict but also supportive of their children's interests. As a result, Dominic always had a lot of friends and was accustomed to being the center of attention. His attractive appearance and charming personality made him a popular figure, and he had many admirers from a young age. However, Dominic preferred to focus on meaningful relationships rather than fleeting romances. After completing high school, Dominic attended a local university, specializing in performing arts with a focus on music production. His ambition was to become a renowned music producer, and he was also a skilled singer-songwriter. By the time he was 20, Dominic had established his own business, purchased a car, and was living in a rented apartment in a good neighborhood. Additionally, he excelled as a student and athlete at the university. Dominic first met McKenzie at a mutual friend's party. This chance encounter turned out to be pivotal for both of them. As complete opposites, they found themselves drawn to each other. Dominic, with his charming and cultured demeanor, quickly caught McKenzie's eye. He was distinctly different from the people she normally socialized with, possessing qualities that set him apart. He was well-educated, well-mannered, and engaging, able to effortlessly converse on a wide range of topics. McKenzie had a striking appearance and a slender figure that caught people's attention. She knew how to present herself and often relied on her charm to make an impression. McKenzie quickly won over the guy she had been interested in, Dominic, and by fall 2021, they started dating. Not long after that, the two introduced each other to their families. While McKenzie's parents were thrilled with her choice, considering the guy an excellent match for their daughter, Dominic's parents had mixed feelings about McKenzie. They found her endearing and innocent at first, but there was something about her that immediately raised concerns for Frank and Christine Russo. Those close to McKenzie believed she had truly fallen in love for the first time, and they hoped this relationship would have a positive impact on her life. Unfortunately, no one could have predicted the tragic endings that would eventually bring their romance to an end. As McKenzie and Dominic spent more time together, they began to appear in public, holding hands and showing affection for each other. It wasn't long before the entire small town knew about their relationship. While some people who knew McKenzie well felt sorry for her boyfriend, Dominic, most were simply happy for the couple. As time passed, Dominic started to notice strange behavior in McKenzie. She was constantly defiant and tried to get everyone to do what she wanted. At first, Dominic thought her behavior was due to her youth and desire for attention. Despite her behavior, the couple made plans for their future, discussing marriage as soon as McKenzie turned 18. They also hoped to leave their small town and move to a big city, such as New York, where Dominic could pursue a music career and showcase his talent. Over time, McKenzie's behavior became increasingly alarming and sometimes frightening to Dominic. She asks him to do what she wants, and if he doesn't agree with her, she gets angry and acts very nasty. Dominic initially disregarded McKenzie's controlling behavior as a joking matter, but then he soon realized her true nature. In public, she maintained a composed exterior, but when they were alone, she took out her anger on him and sometimes attacked him. Dominic felt he couldn't stand his girlfriend any longer and proposed a temporary separation to reconsider their feelings. However, McKenzie responded by having a very breakdown in front of their mutual friends. She yelled, threatened to harm Dominic if he ended the relationship, and even threatened to burn down his house and wreck his car. These actions had the opposite effect of what McKenzie intended. This makes Dominic even more want to end their toxic relationship. McKenzie was determined to hold on to her boyfriend, refusing to acknowledge the end of the relationship. Initially, she acted as though nothing was wrong, continuing to call Dominic and invite him to various parties and events. She also posted affectionate photos of the two on social media, express her love for him. However, when Dominic made it clear that the relationship was over, McKenzie's behavior changed. She became furious and began showing up at his house almost daily, standing under his window and shouting insults and threats. She also resorted to calling him from different phone numbers, leaving messages on his answering machine, and sending emails. In these messages, McKenzie's tone was inconsistent. Sometimes she will gently express her feelings for him and offer to restart the relationship. However, there are times when she will use insults and threats against Dominic. Dominic was baffled by McKenzie's behavior, having never experienced anything similar before. He struggled to respond and tried various approaches, including talking to her and ignoring her. He also documented her aggressive outbursts using his phone. The situation became unbearable as McKenzie would publicly scream at and insult Dominic whenever she saw him, making his life extremely difficult. Despite this, Dominic held on to the hope that with time, McKenzie would eventually leave him alone and move on. McKenzie made a shocking statement in front of witnesses, saying it would be easier for her to kill Dominic than to let him move on from her. She threatened that if he didn't return to her, she would make sure no one else could have him. At first, Dominic didn't take her words seriously, but those around him knew she was not joking. Her threats also included hitting and running him over with a car, driving him off a cliff, or stopping on railroad tracks in front of an oncoming train. She described each scenario in detail, as if she had already planned it out. However, McKenzie soon realized that her threats and insults only pushed Dominic further away. She decided to change her tactics, switching from being aggressive to being sweet and charming again. She stopped pressuring and harassing Dominic and pretended to have learned from her mistakes, wanting to change for the better. She started talking about college plans, asking for his help in choosing a university, and claiming that she had become more focused on her studies, particularly her upcoming final exams. Dominic was pleasantly surprised by the changes in McKenzie and, still having feelings for her, he decided to help her with her university enrollment. As they started seeing each other again, they gradually rekindled their closeness. Dominic began taking her on dates and spending all his free time with her, thinking she had become more mature and responsible. He fell in love with her again without even realizing it, and their past issues seemed to fade away. This time, they kept their reunion private and didn't tell their friends and acquaintances about it. Therefore, their dates are private and discreet, allowing them to enjoy their time together without seeking outside attention. When Dominic's brother Angelo found out, he warned that nothing good would come of it. But Dominic didn't listen, because he loved her too much, so he didn't pay attention to his brother's words. Dominic thinks that McKenzie has changed positively after they reunited, but he had no idea what she was really planning. Unbeknownst to him, McKenzie had devised a sinister plan to exact revenge on him. She became obsessed with the idea of a disastrous car accident. She would spend her free time traveling around the city and looking for the perfect place to carry out her plan. McKenzie considered crashing into a steep cliff or stepping in front of the train, but she couldn't find cliff nearby and thought the idea of blocking the train was untrustworthy. One day, while driving through an industrial area, she stumbled upon a secluded spot with no cameras or traffic. A massive brick wall caught her attention, and her twisted imagination quickly conjured up a new and equally horrific plan. She decided that accelerating to top speed and crashing into the wall would be just as spectacular as the other ideas she had considered. Initially, McKenzie had planned to end her life alongside her lover, Dominic, intending for their tragic story to become a cautionary tale for the entire city. She had confided in her best friend about this plan, but her friend thought she was joking because she had had such wild ideas before. In late July 2022, just days before McKenzie's 18th birthday, she asked Dominic if he wanted to attend a mutual friend's party with her. She told him that it would be the perfect opportunity for them to have some fun, relax, and make it clear to everyone that they were back together and deeply in love. Dominic quickly agreed, as he still trusted McKenzie and didn't question her feelings or intentions. On the night of July 30th, Dominic and McKenzie arriving at the party holding hands. Their entrance caught everyone's attention, and they looked happy and in love as they openly displayed their affection for each other. Their friends were genuinely thrilled to see them reunited but notice how well-suited the couple was. When night fell, Dominic and McKenzie freely took photos, kissed and enjoyed their time together without any hesitation. However, no one had any idea that this joyful celebration would take a devastating turn. Dominic and McKenzie drank some alcohol, like other people at that party, but McKenzie secretly took a dose of illegal drugs, for courage, to not change her mind at the last minute and slammed on the brakes. The next morning, Dominic and McKenzie bid farewell to the guests and began to head out to their car. However, they were approached by a friend of the guy, Davion Flanagan, who requested a ride home in their vehicle. McKenzie tried to decline request, said that they had made other plans, but Dominic didn't see any problem with driving his friend home. McKenzie eventually relented, and she agreed to give Davion a ride home. McKenzie took the driver's seat, with Dominic beside her and Davion behind him. They left the party venue and headed onto the main road. McKenzie drove cautiously, adhering to the speed limit and avoiding drawing attention to themselves. When they approached an empty intersection, she stopped at the red light. As they waited, Davion dozed off, allowing her to reconsider her intentions. In her later statement, McKenzie claimed she had planned to die in an accident, but her words were discredited by the fact that she had buckled her seatbelt during the previous stop, while Davion remained unbuckled. As the light turned green, McKenzie suddenly accelerated and took a sharp turn onto a poorly lit secondary road that led into an industrial area. Dominic and Davion seemed unaware of what was happening, and the cars sped up as if McKenzie had lost control. Pressing hard on the gas pedal, she careened the vehicle toward a brick wall. Luckily, a witness happened to be in the area. On an early Sunday morning, the industrial area was deserted, with no other people around to see the accident or offer assistance. However, a woman who lived near the scene heard the crash and went outside to find out what's happening. Seeing smoke and realizing a car had crashed, she quickly returned to her home to call for emergency help. About 30 minutes after the accident, medics arrived at the scene. Unfortunately, Davion and Dominic in the car succumbed to their injuries and died instantly. McKenzie, however, was fortunate to have survived thanks to her seatbelt and airbags. McKenzie, the driver, was unconscious and trapped in the wreckage with severe leg injuries, but she was breathing and had a palpable pulse, giving hope that she will survive. During the process of being freed from the car, McKenzie briefly regained consciousness but she appeared disoriented and unaware of her surroundings. Once released from the vehicle, she was immediately rushed to the hospital for treatment. At the hospital, doctors diagnosed McKenzie with multiple fractures and viscera injuries. Blood tests also revealed that she had been under the influence of both alcohol and drugs at the time of the accident. The police initially received leads and a confession in the investigation. After learning the results of McKenzie's tests, it was thought that she was under the influence of addictive substances and didn't understand her actions. It's possible she tried to drive through the wall or didn't notice any obstacles, as there was no sign of braking. Since McKenzie was unconscious in the intensive care unit after a complex operation, the police couldn't question her at first. When she regained consciousness, she became hysterical and confessed to the doctor, saying she deliberately crashed into the wall to kill Dominic and initially intended to die with him. McKenzie also said that Dave was an unintended victim because he was hitchhiking in their car. Doctors dismissed McKenzie's confession, believing it was a delusional state caused by anesthesia, painkillers, and grief over her boyfriend's death. However, when the police spoke with McKenzie, her story changed completely. This time, McKenzie said she remembered almost nothing about the incident of that night due to consuming alcohol and using illegal substances. McKenzie claimed she had a memory lapse after getting in the car and had no idea how Davion ended up in the car. However, evidence contradicted this. Surveillance footage tracked the car's initial route and showed McKenzie driving cautiously and following the rules until she suddenly turned onto a road leading to an industrial area. Furthermore, it was discovered that McKenzie had previously driven the entire route days earlier, and her car had been spotted by multiple witnesses. After being discharged from the hospital, McKenzie quickly recovered and attempted to resume her disinterested life. She showed no remorse for her actions and was confident about evading consequences. She became active on social media again, met with friends, and made future plans. By September, she even attended a concert in a nearby city, featuring her favorite band, seemed unaffected by her boyfriend's passing. McKenzie lived an active life despite having her legs in a fragile state. She would often appear at concerts in a wheelchair, wearing vibrant makeup and taking selfies to share on social media. Just a month after recovering, McKenzie attended a Halloween party in a pre-made costume where she met new people and enjoyed herself. However, her life has changed completely on November 4, 2022, when she was taken into custody. The investigation gathered enough evidence to bring the case to trial. McKenzie was charged with premeditated aggravated double murder and possession of a controlled substance found in her pocket and detected in her blood. However, during the trial, McKenzie changed her testimony multiple times. Initially, she claimed to have memory loss, but when her friend testified against her, revealing her plan, she shifted her defense. McKenzie then claimed she had intended to die alongside her lover, but this was disproven when it was discovered she had secured herself with a seatbelt. McKenzie Sharilla was found guilty of all charges on August 21, 2023. However, due to her age at the time of the crime, just 5 days shy of her 18th birthday, the court took this into consideration and tried her as a minor. Under state law, McKenzie was eligible for consecutive 15-year prison sentences without parole for each murder she committed. However, due to her young age, the court decided to let her serve these sentences simultaneously. This meant she would be eligible for parole in 15 years. By that time, McKenzie would be 33 years old. Both the prosecution and defense expressed displeasure with the court's decision. Dominic family members felt the sentence was too lenient, and they intended to appeal for a stricter punishment. On the other hand, McKenzie's parents and lawyer believed the sentence was too harsh and decided to appeal as well. The judge refused to change the sentence, questioning whether McKenzie would be released after 15 years in prison. In his opinion, McKenzie showed no remorse for her actions and displayed arrogance towards the court. The extended prison term would provide her with ample time to reflect on the gravity of her crimes. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Ryan Poston. Ryan Poston was born on December 30, 1982, in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky, to parents Lisa Carter and Jay Poston. He had a close and loving relationship with his three sisters, Allison, Catherine, and Elizabeth. Ryan spent a significant portion of his teenage years traveling and studying abroad, attending schools in both Switzerland and the Philippines. Ryan was known for his adventurous nature, exceptional physical appearance, and charismatic personality, made him a standout among his peers. After high school, he attended Indiana University, where he majored in political science, history, and geography. Ryan graduated with honors in 2005. Following his family's tradition, Ryan decided to pursue a career in law. He enrolled in the Salmon P. Chase College of Law at Northern Kentucky University. Ryan had a profound respect for the legal profession, inspired by his grandfather and uncle, who were both attorneys. He had ambitious goals, one of which is the dream of owning a law firm. For the time being, Ryan worked in Cincinnati, Ohio, where he dedicated himself to offering affordable legal services to individuals who could not afford higher-priced attorneys. Although still young, Ryan had already built a considerable reputation. He attracted many clients seeking his advice and guidance. He worked diligently to ensure that everyone, regardless of their financial situation, had access to fair and competent legal representation. In 2011, Ryan has been through a painful breakup. He often visited his cousin Carissa in Lexington, Kentucky, seeking comfort and support. On one of these visits, his life underwent a dramatic change after an encounter with Shayna Michelle Hubers. Originally from Lexington, Kentucky, Shayna was a Southern and is the epitome of a true Southern girl, known for her extroverted and sociable personality. Her warmth and charm drew people to her. After graduating from high school in 2009 with a full scholarship, she studied psychology at the University of Kentucky. She then pursued her master's degree in psychology at Eastern Kentucky University. Despite their age gap, Ryan, 29, and Shayna, 21, couldn't deny their strong feelings for each other. Whenever Ryan visited his cousin Carissa in Lexington, he ended up spending more time with Shayna, and their connection deepened. As their relationship grew, Shayna began to spend most of her weekends in Highland Heights, Kentucky, where Ryan lived. She'd pack her bags, head to his home, and take care of him, cooking and cleaning for him. As time passed, their feelings grew deeper and deeper. Ryan introduced Shayna to his parents. She couldn't hide her excitement from her friends, raving about Ryan, and shares her dream of becoming Ryan's wife. However, the promising future of Ryan and Shayna came to a tragic end on October 12, 2012. On that day, Shayna called the authorities and reported that she had just killed her boyfriend, Ryan. According to Shayna, the incident began when Ryan attempted to physically abuse her. He allegedly dragged her out of the house when she tried to collect her belongings, and he confronted her with a gun. The situation became very tense and turned into a violent brawl, during which Shayna gained control of the firearm. Feeling intimidated by Ryan's, she panicked and pulled the trigger, shooting him. Believing Ryan was fatally wounded and wanting to end his suffering, she shot him several more times. Shayna believed Ryan's death was inevitable, so she wanted to end his suffering. After the shooting, Shayna placed the gun on a bookshelf and called 911 to report the incident. When officers arrived, they requested her to exit the apartment with her hands raised. Despite initial hesitation, but she complied, following the officer's instructions to lie face down on the ground. Throughout that time, Shayna appeared visibly upset. After handcuffing Shayna and placing her in the patrol vehicle, the officers entered the apartment. Inside, they found Ryan Poston dead on the dining room floor, covered in blood. Investigators then arrived and surveyed Ryan's condo. The condo appeared somewhat messy, but not unusually so for a 29-year-old man. Further investigation revealed that Ryan had a permit to carry a concealed weapon and owned firearms. The gun used by Shayna to shoot Ryan was identified as his own Sig Sauer semi-automatic pistol. Based on evidence from the apartment, investigators concluded Ryan was sitting at the table when Shayna started shooting. Blood on the table confirmed this. However, several items on the dining table were untouched, contradicting Shayna's account of a struggle. Typically, a fight would have knocked these items out of place. Investigators thoroughly examined Ryan's apartment for clues. Simultaneously, officers went door to door in the neighborhood to gather more information from Ryan's neighbors. A neighbor named Nikki provided valuable information to the detective. She knows Shayna well and feels Shayna is more responsible for the relationship than Ryan. Nikki reported that the couple often had loud arguments that disturbed the neighborhood. Months earlier, Shayna had visited Nikki, crying and expressing her fear of Ryan. Shayna claimed that a violent altercation with Ryan had left her injured, and he threw her down the hallway. Nikki believed Shayna's story and urged her to report the incident to the police. However, Shayna decided not to do that. When Shayna was at the police station, detectives interviewed her about the shooting of boyfriend Ryan. Before they started the questioning, the officers told Shayna her rights, which informed her that she had the right to a lawyer. Shayna asked for a lawyer, so the questioning was put on hold. While she waited in the interrogation room, she filled out some paperwork, under the supervision of a detective. Shayna chose to speak with the detective despite asking for an attorney. When asked the name of the victim, Shayna showed no emotion, simply stating, "the man she killed," clearly referring to her long-term boyfriend, Ryan. During the interrogation, Shayna explained that she acted in self-defense. She claimed Ryan had physically attacked her, grabbing her throat and throwing her around their apartment. During a break in the interrogation, the detective stepped out of the room and another officer took over. Shayna then shared new information with the officer about her confrontation with Ryan. She stated that before the shooting, Ryan said mean and unpleasant things to her, calling her unhinged and taunting her while holding a gun. Shayna attributed Ryan's violent behavior that night to being under the influence of substances. She maintained her account of the incident leading up to the shooting, claiming Ryan was sitting at the dining table handling ammunition for his pistol. She caught him staring at her from across the table and believed this was a sign that he intended to kick her out of his condo. Shayna admitted to seizing the opportunity to grab the gun and shoot Ryan. In the midst of chaos, Shayna fired one shot at Ryan, hitting him. Shayna initially thought she needed to end his suffering, as he was twitching after the first shot, and proceeded to fire several more shots, ultimately resulting in Ryan's death. Shayna revealed in her confession that Ryan was self-conscious about his appearance, especially his nose, and had previously expressed a desire to get a nose job. With this knowledge, Shayna intentionally shot Ryan in the face, claiming she was granting his wish. Throughout the interrogation, Shayna revealed that she was worried her relationship would be affected if people found out her boyfriend was dead. Specifically, she feared that no one would want to marry her if they knew she had killed her boyfriend, even if it was in self-defense. After hearing her out, the detective arrested Shayna and charged her with Ryan's murder. Shayna appeared to be surprised by her arrest, insisting that she had only shot Ryan to protect herself, and apparently expecting a different outcome. In 2015, Shayna's trial started, and the courtroom was filled with anticipation. The prosecutor began by comparing Shayna to Jodi Arias, another woman who had been accused of murdering her boyfriend, Travis Alexander. The similarities between the two cases were striking. This comparison increased the tension in the courtroom as everyone waited to see what would happen. The prosecutor argued that Shayna was fixated on her boyfriend, Ryan, and that he was all she could think about. According to the prosecution, Shayna's conversations were dominated by talk of Ryan. During the trial, the prosecutor presented a narrative of Ryan's intentions based on his friends' accounts. According to them, Ryan planned to end his relationship with Shayna and intentionally avoid her phone calls and texts. Despite these things, Shayna continued to show up at his condo in Highland Heights uninvited. The prosecution presented evidence that Ryan had plans to meet Audrey Bolt, the 2012 Miss Ohio, for a date on the night of the murder. This new information supported the prosecution's theory that Shayna was motivated by jealousy and anger towards Ryan's new relationship. Audrey testified that she had arranged to meet Ryan for drinks at a bar that night and waited for him, but he never arrived. It was only later that she discovered he had been shot and killed. During Shayna's trial, the prosecution showed the jury evidence that Ryan had often expressed his wish to end their relationship. Shortly before his death, Ryan called his father, Jay, for advice on how to handle the situation. Jay told Ryan to be kind to Shayna to avoid an ugly breakup. Despite Ryan wanting to break up with Shayna peacefully, but she continued to manipulate him. On the day of Ryan's death, evidence showed that he spent a lot of time texting with Shayna. In these texts, Ryan clearly told her that he didn't want to see her that weekend because he had other plans. Nevertheless, Shayna showed up at his condo uninvited, which was a common occurrence. The prosecution argued that during the argument, Ryan told Shayna it was over and she could no longer control him. This enraged Shayna, who then shot Ryan in a fit of rage. In trial, the prosecution played a video of Shayna's interrogation to show the jury that she was a cold-blooded killer. The video showed Shayna dancing and singing, seemingly unaffected by the departure of her boyfriend, Ryan. After killing a loved one in self-defense, most people would be extremely upset, crying and overwhelmed by what they had done. By showing the video, the prosecution argued that Shayna was a very emotionless person and did not feel remorse for what she did, implying that she didn't act like someone who had killed in self-defense. However, this explanation is not objective and depends on the jury's perspective. The interrogation video was a key piece of evidence in the prosecution's case against Shayna. However, it was not the only evidence presented during the trial. Shayna's defense team stuck to a consistent story throughout the trial. They claimed that Ryan was the one who behaved erratically and violently on the night of the incident, which ultimately led to Shayna shooting him. To support this claim, the defense team described Ryan's state of mind. They alleged that the combination of medications he was taking, including anti-anxiety medication and amphetamines, is the cause. To strengthen their argument, Shayna's attorneys presented autopsy results to the jury, prove that Ryan was using these drugs at the time of his death. This evidence suggested that Ryan's actions may have been influenced by the medications he is taking. The defense also called an expert toxicologist to testify that combining anti-anxiety medication and amphetamines could lead to violent and paranoid behavior. The goal of this testimony was to create a plausible explanation for Shayna's actions and then prove that she killed Ryan in self-defense. During Shayna's trial in April 2015, the prosecution was concerned that she would be acquitted because she was an intelligent, young, and beautiful woman. They worried that her self-defense claims might sway the jury. However, on April 23, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, convicting Shayna Michelle Hubers of murdering her boyfriend, Ryan Poston. At the sentencing hearing in August 2015, Shayna continued to blame Ryan for his death, which outraged his friends and family. Despite the evidence presented during the trial, Shayna maintained her innocence and refused to take responsibility for her actions. In Kentucky, a defendant who is a victim of domestic violence may be eligible for parole after serving 20% of their sentence. However, the judge did not grant Shayna this reduced parole, citing that she had committed a premeditated murder. Shayna was sentenced to 40 years in prison and will be eligible for parole in 17 years, in 2032, when she is 41 years old. Shayna appealed her sentence and was granted a new trial in August 2016. The appeal was granted because one of the jurors had a felony conviction, which is against Kentucky law, as felons are not allowed to serve on juries. In August 2018, after a 4-month delay, Shayna's second trial began. During opening arguments, Shayna's defense attorney stated that she had made every effort to please Ryan for the entire time they were together, a year and a half. But in the end, their love story encountered problems. According to the defense team, on the first night Shayna and Ryan met, he committed physical and sexual violence against her. This incident had a profound and lasting effect on Shayna, causing her to take several weeks to respond to Ryan's messages afterward. The defense claimed that Shayna's history of trauma began in high school when she was sexually assaulted. This led to her struggling with alcohol addiction and sexual promiscuity for many years. Her defense team argued that this traumatic experience significantly influenced her behavior on the night of the murder. The defense strategy aimed to create a sympathetic of Shayna by sharing her troubled past. They sought to prove that Shayna was not fully in control of her actions on the night of the murder. The defense hoped to show that Shayna's behavior was the result of a mix of factors. These factors included her history of abuse and her toxic relationship with Ryan. The goal was to show that Shayna was a victim of domestic violence at the hands of Ryan, rather than a cold-blooded killer. The defense argued that Shayna's actions were not driven by a desire for revenge or financial gain. Instead, they were the result of years of abuse she suffered at the hands of Ryan. Shayna's defense attorney argued that Ryan's constant criticism about her weight and chest size, as well as his pressure on her to get breast enlargement, significantly affected her self-esteem. The defense claimed that this criticism, along with the strain in their sexual relationship, contributed to Shayna's feelings of inadequacy. The defense presented evidence that Shayna had sought medical help to improve their romantic life, getting an injection to address their sexual difficulties. However, Ryan's rejection and lack of interest made the problems in their relationship worse, leaving Shayna feeling frustrated and isolated. Additionally, the defense alleged that Ryan would often end things with Shayna and then talk to other women, further straining the problems in their relationship. During their opening statement, the prosecution told the jury that they wouldn't portray Ryan as a perfect boyfriend. However, they made it clear that he wasn't abusive. They claimed that Shayna shot and killed Ryan not in self-defense. The prosecution alleged that Shayna shot Ryan because he had ended their relationship on the night of the incident. Ryan had decided it was time to break up with Shayna because she would not leave him alone. According to the prosecution, Shayna's repeated returns to Ryan after he ended things demonstrated her inability to move on from the relationship. During the trial, the prosecution showed text messages from Shayna to her friends. These messages stated that the intimate activities between Shayna and Ryan had strengthened their relationship. However, when Shayna took the stand in her own defense during her second trial, she disagreed. She claimed that these activities had actually pushed them further apart. In another set of text messages, Shayna had asked to have sex, but Ryan was taking antidepressants. The medication's side effects had reduced his sex drive. However, when Shayna testified, she alleged that Ryan had forced her into having sex. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury convicted Shayna Michelle Hubers of murdering Ryan Poston for the second time. Despite conflicting testimonies and evidence, they upheld their initial verdict. During the sentencing hearing, Shayna's mother emotionally shared her daughter's singing talent and how it earned her multiple college scholarships. Choked with emotion, she asked the jury to consider the possibility of parole for Shayna. However, she acknowledged this didn't lessen the grief and suffering that Ryan's family was experiencing. Shayna Michelle Hubers was sentenced to life in prison without parole. She must serve at least 17 years before being considered for parole in 2032. She is serving her sentence at the Kentucky Correctional Institute for Women in Pewee Valley, Kentucky. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Angie Houseman. Angie Houseman was born on February 18, 1984, in St. Louis, Missouri. Her father left the family before she was born, and she would never have the chance to meet him. However, her mother married a man named Ronald when she was 1 year old, and in the addition of a younger brother to the family. The two sisters got along very well, with Angie particularly fond of her younger brother. Angie was known for her friendly and outgoing personality, always striving to build relationships with those around her. Her family resided in a peaceful suburban neighborhood in St. Louis. In 1993, at the age of 9, Angie attended the 4th grade at a local elementary school, about a mile away from her home. Her daily go-to-school involved taking a bus from a nearby stop, which her parents considered relatively safe due to its proximity to their house. Typically, Angie and her neighborhood friends walked together from the school to the bus stop after class. There were many parents watching from their windows to ensure their safety. This has become a habit in their neighborhood, intended to provide peace of mind that children will return home safely. On November 18th, Angie followed her usual routine, attending school and finishing at 3 p.m. She took the school bus home with a few neighborhood kids. At that point, the other kids continued to their homes. Angie walked alone the short remaining distance home because her house was farther away. However, Angie didn't arrive home, and as the minutes passed, her parents started to worry. They knew Angie often chatted with friends on her way home, but it has never taken this long. Concerned, Angie's mom and stepdad decided to walk along her route from the house to the bus stop to see if they could find her. While walking, they met other kids from Angie's school. They confirmed she had gotten off the bus with them and headed in the direction of her home. The parents also spoke with neighbors who usually kept an eye on the kids, but were preoccupied on that particular day and hadn't seen anything. Angie's parents became more and more worried and insecure. They and their friends started searching the area along her route from the bus stop to their home. As the sun began to set and darkness fell, they didn't give up. Realizing Angie was unlikely to wander off in the cold weather, the parents eventually decided to call the police. The police immediately joined the search for Angie. Due to the cold weather, it seemed unlikely that she would wander off alone. Therefore, the police initially focused on investigating whether she had been kidnapped. 10 days before Angie went missing, an 11-year-old girl was almost kidnapped in a nearby area, which made everyone even more concerned. An unknown person approached the girl as she got off the school bus and attempted to pull her into the bushes. Fortunately, she managed to escape. However, since the assailant was still at large, the police believed he might be linked to Angie's disappearance. To investigate, officers deployed K9 units, which detected Angie's scent near the bus stop. The dogs tracked the scent about halfway to her house, but lost it suddenly, suggesting that Angie might have gotten into a vehicle at that location, which further supported the possibility of an abduction. The police expanded their search for Angie by deploying helicopters with thermal sensors and scouring the banks of a nearby stream, but they failed to locate either the girl or her belongings. The first day, the search turned up no results. As the investigation unfolded, the police released information about Angie's disappearance to the media, which quickly spread throughout the city. The police department receiving over 300 calls within 24 hours. To manage the influx of leads, more than 20 additional officers were assigned to the case. However, none of these clues were helpful in finding Angie. The detectives pursued every lead, with a strong focus on Angie's stepfather from the beginning. Despite this, he insisted he was innocent and willingly cooperated with the investigation, even agreeing to take a lie detector test in an effort to clear his name and help the police focus on finding Angie. During the investigation into Angie's biological father, a new piece of information came to light. Although he had never been in direct contact with his daughter, but the biological father had allegedly driven past her house multiple times to watch her play outside, according to Angie's mother. While detectives found this behavior suspicious, the biological father had a solid alibi that checked out. By the third day, the FBI joined the investigation, and the police department allocated even more officers to the case. It was clear to everyone that something serious had happened to Angie, as she could barely survive on the streets in such harsh weather conditions. A break in the case came when a witness in Angie's neighborhood reported seeing a suspicious man driving a blue sedan. The description matched a person who had attempted to abduct a girl just 10 days earlier. Based on this, investigators created a composite sketch, which was featured in the media and appearing on thousands of distributed flyers. Unfortunately, the identity of the suspect remained a mystery. As Angie's disappearance gained national attention through television, the number of leads increased. Police carefully evaluated each one but found no connections to the case. However, as the case drew more public attention, psychics started contacting Angie's family, claiming to have had visions of the missing girl. One psychic even named a specific location, a large national park 25 miles from Angie's home, where they believed she was being held. However, detectives chose not to pursue this information. To encourage tips, a $10,000 reward was offered for any information about Angie's location, resulting in an influx of tips. During the investigation, detectives discovered a disturbing detail. A few days before she disappeared, Angie mentioned to her teacher that she would be going on a nature trip with her uncle. However, this statement raised red flags, as Angie did not actually have an uncle, and her parents were unaware of what she meant by this claim. Detectives considered the possibility that Angie might have known the person who took her, referring to them as her uncle in conversation. Despite their efforts, investigators failed to uncover any information about this mysterious individual in the days that followed. The case seemed to be at a standstill until 9 days after Angie's disappearance, on November 27th. A young girl's body was discovered near a tree, severely mistreated. She had no clothing on and was bound with handcuffs. Her head was completely covered in tape, except for a small exposed area around her nose. A nearby bag contained personal items, including notebooks with her name, that confirmed the body was that of Angie. Autopsies by medical examiners revealed more disturbing details about Angie's death. A piece of underwear was found stuffed in her mouth after the tape on her head was removed. The investigation determined that she had died just hours before her discovery and had likely been held captive for 9 days before succumbing. Furthermore, experts concluded that Angie suffered numerous physical injuries and endured a sexual assault. A thorough examination of the crime scene by forensic experts led to the discovery of a fingerprint on the tape used to cover Angie's head. The police tried to find matching information in the database and between several suspects, but didn't bring any clues. Following the discovery of the body, the police increased their efforts in the investigation. As news of the tragic incident spread, local residents became fearful, increasing their vigilance. To protect their children, they started escorting them to and from school, meeting them at bus stops, and keeping a close watch over them at all times. On December 1st, a 10-year-old girl named Casey Dissa went missing in a nearby town, just 10 miles from Angie's house. Casey had received permission from her mother to visit friends who lived a short distance away. But she never made it to their home. The police were unsuccessful in locating her, fueling the detectives' fear that they might be dealing with a serial killer. Initially, detectives did not rule out the possibility that the same person was responsible for both Angie's and Casey's disappearances. However, they lacked evidence to support this theory. 10 days later, Casey's body was found in St. Louis, wrapped in bedding in a curtain. The cause of death was determined to be severe head trauma from multiple blows. Despite the investigation, detectives were unable to uncover any leads pointing to the killer. Furthermore, the distinct nature of the two crimes led them to reconsider their initial theory. As a result, they began to consider the possibility of two separate murderers in the same month. Investigations into Angie's disappearance led detectives to identify a man who had attempted to abduct another girl a few days earlier. The suspect, 37-year-old Gary, frequently traveled to St. Louis for work. Although he became a person of interest in the murders of Angie and Casey, he had a solid alibi for the time they went missing. However, during questioning, Gary admitted to assaulting 4 other girls and was ultimately sentenced to 5 years in prison. The following February, the case took a new turn. Near where Casey's body was found, investigators found tire tracks that were associated with a pickup truck from a well-known rental car company known for its distinctive logo. Detectives showed photos of the tire tracks to locals, asking if they had seen a pickup truck from that company in the area. The detectives received a crucial lead. One woman came forward, saying she had seen such a pickup near her neighbor's house about a week after Casey's disappearance. After investigation, the police discovered that the house belonged to a woman living with her husband and brother. She claimed none of them had rented the pickup and maintained they were not connected to the case. However, detectives remained skeptical and obtained a search warrant for the house. The search revealed blood matching Casey's in the basement, along with the murder weapon. A further investigation uncovered key information in Casey's case. The pickup truck used to transport the body was rented by Thomas, the brother of the woman who owned the house. Initially, Thomas denied any involvement in the crime. However, when presented with the existing evidence, he eventually confessed. According to Thomas's statement, Casey knocked on his door and wanted to invite his nephews to come out with her. Thomas invited Casey into the house and led her to the basement, where he attempted to assault her. When Casey screamed, Thomas hit her with a heavy object, ultimately killing her. He then covered her body with bed sheets. Despite committing the crime, Thomas went to work as usual. Upon returning home, Thomas' sister told him that she had discovered the body in the basement, but she didn't want to know what had happened and asked that it be disposed of quickly. Casey's body remained in the basement for a week, because outside, the search was still going on for her. Thomas was too afraid to move Casey's body until the investigation died down. Once the situation became less intense, Thomas rented a pickup truck, transported Casey's body to St. Louis, and abandoned it there. Thomas was eventually convicted of Casey's murder and received a death sentence. However, he died in prison several years later due to illnesses before the sentence could be carried out. During the investigation, Thomas denied any connection to Angie's case, leading detectives to believe that the two cases were not connected. The investigation into Angie's murder stagnated for many months, with the number of leads dwindling over time. Years later, detectives encountered a new obstacle, the expiration of the reward for providing information, which detectives feared would decrease public involvement. However, a local businessman donated $250,000 to incentivize people to come forward with information. This bonus was one of the biggest at the time, generated a large number of tips, but disappointingly, the case remains unsolved. In 2001, a prison inmate named Corey Fox contacted detectives and confessed to over 10 murders, including the murder of Angie Houseman. Detectives met with Corey, then he recounted how he and an accomplice abducted Angie from the street and held her captive in his house for several days. Initially, the plan was to demand a ransom in exchange for Angie's safe return. However, Corey and his accomplice became concerned that they might be identified and decided to murder her. Corey provided detectives with many accurate details about the crime, including the fact that Angie was tied to a tree and that his accomplice used her underwear as a gag. However, some discrepancies arose during the questioning, particularly with regards to how Angie was restrained. Corey claimed that they used plastic handcuffs, but evidence showed that perpetrator actually used iron handcuffs. Furthermore, investigators discovered that Corey could not have committed some of the murders he confessed to. As a result, police concluded that he likely fabricated parts of his confession, possibly drawing information from media of Angie's case. In the summer of 2002, when a 6-year-old girl was abducted from her home and murdered in a different St. Louis neighborhood. Authorities initially considered whether the two crimes were connected, but this theory proved unfounded. The killer, a neighbor, was quickly caught and confessed during questioning. The investigation into Angie's case lay dormant for several years, until 2007, when detectives reopened the file. Upon reviewing the case documents, they stumbled upon a noteworthy detail. Shortly after Angie's body was discovered, police had found a man named Roger Martin sitting in a parked car nearby. When questioned about his emergence, Roger claimed he was in the area to go hunting. However, a search of his vehicle revealed no hunting equipment, raising suspicions about his true intentions. The new detective team decided to investigate Roger further, which revealed his prior convictions for crimes against children. Notably, one of his past victims was assaulted near the area where Angie's body was discovered. All of these crimes happened before Angie's death, but the police had failed to thoroughly look into Roger at the time. This meant that the new team had to start over from the beginning. The detectives brought Roger in for questioning, but he denied any involvement in Angie's murder. He claimed that he just happened to be near that location. The interrogation lasted 9 hours, but still yielded no new clues. The police compared Roger's fingerprints with the ones on the tape found on Angie's head, but the experts found that they did not match. As a result, Roger was released. Although the police continued to consider him a suspect, they lacked sufficient evidence to hold him. The case of Angie saw a breakthrough in 2018, when the St. Louis Police Department created a task force specifically to investigate this case. With the advancement of technology, the detectives re-examined the existing evidence, searching for new leads. Their investigation centered on 3 crucial pieces of evidence: the handcuffs, the tape from Angie's head, and her underwear used as a gag. Despite repeated efforts since 1993, experts had struggled to detect the perpetrator's DNA on these items. The task force decided to re-examine the evidence with modern technology. The detectives first focused on the handcuffs but encountered a difficulty due to the presence of Angie's blood covering almost the entire surface. Next, they turned their attention to the tape from Angie's head, but faced another obstacle. Upon opening the box containing the evidence, they discovered that the tape had deteriorated significantly over time. Finally, they examined the underwear that had been used to gag Angie. Although they did not have much hope for this evidence, since it had been in her mouth for hours, so it was likely that any foreign DNA had been removed. However, they still investigated it as a last resort. Using advanced technology, they carefully examined every inch of the underwear, leading to a breakthrough. A small sample of DNA was found, sufficient for analysis. The experts confirmed the DNA belonged to a male and immediately uploaded it to the FBI database. Although it is common for DNA searches to yield no matches, requiring additional investigation, the detectives were fortunate in this case. As soon as the DNA sample was uploaded, they received a full match. The DNA belonged to 58-year-old Earl Cox, who had been incarcerated since 2003. In the investigation into Angie's case, Earl Cox initially had not been on the police's radar, but his criminal record was substantial. His history of crime dated back to 1982, when he was serving in the military in Germany and working as a part-time babysitter for girls reported being sexually assaulted by Earl, resulting in an 8-year prison sentence in the United States. He was subsequently discharged from the Army after serving only 3 years. Earl was released from prison early and moved to St. Louis. However, 4 years later, he found himself in trouble with the law again. In this instance, he was arrested after 2 7-year-old girls accused him of sexually assaulting them. Although the charges were eventually dropped due to a lack of evidence, the arrest itself was a parole violation. As a result, Earl received an additional year in prison. After serving this extra year, Earl was released in 1992 and settled in St. Louis, where his relatives lived. The following year, a tragic incident happened. Earl abducted and killed Angie. In 2002, Earl was arrested again for operating a secret online platform where individuals shared child abuse content. The FBI had been monitoring his activities and set a trap by having an undercover agent pose as a 14-year-old girl and make contact with him. Earl made explicit intentions to exploit the girl and sent money for her to meet him. However, when Earl showed up at the meeting place, he was met by armed FBI agents instead of the girl. This led to his arrest. A search of his computer revealed a massive collection of over 45,000 images of child abuse. Further investigation also revealed that Earl was the mastermind behind the platform, leading to the arrest of 60 more individuals associated with the site. This operation was one of the largest against pedophiles in the country. In 2003, Earl was sentenced to 10 years in prison. However, when his sentence ended, a judge used a legal loophole to keep Earl in detention, citing him as a serious threat to children. As a result, Earl remained in prison. In 2019, a DNA match linked Earl to Angie Houseman's case. Detectives visited him in prison, but Earl denied involvement and requested a lawyer. Despite the strong DNA evidence, investigators took an alternative approach. They offered Earl's lawyer a deal. In exchange for Earl's confession, the prosecution would drop the death penalty and pursue a life sentence instead. Earl agreed, likely aware that he would lose the case in court. When detectives returned to the prison, Earl shared his account of incident. Although some details raised suspicions, his admission to the murder was the key point for investigators. Earl claimed that on November 18, 1993, he was driving through his family's neighborhood when his car broke down. And while he was trying to find out what was wrong with the car, a school bus pulled up and children disembarked. While the others went home, Angie remained outside, drawing Earl's attention. Earl claimed that when Angie approached him, they had a brief chat, and he noticed she seemed extremely cold. He offered her a ride in his car, which she allegedly accepted. Earl then took Angie to Burger King to get food, and afterwards, took her to his home. Here, he sexually assaulted her for several days. Eventually, Earl decided to dispose of Angie, drove her to a remote location, where her body was later found, and tied her to a tree. However, she was still alive at that time. Detectives had doubts about certain parts of Earl's story. They didn't think Angie would agree to go anywhere with a stranger, especially since she only had a short distance to walk home. Investigators have questioned Earl's story about the car breakdown, as he claimed the car stalled but started again as soon as Angie approached. It seems more likely that Earl saw Angie and decided to abduct her. A more probable scenario is that he lured her into the car by lying or threatening her. This is more credible than his confession. Detectives were to obtain the confession they needed for the murder. Earl Cox was sentenced to life in prison without parole by a judge in August 2020. Although justice had been served, it came too late for Angie's mother, who had passed away from cancer in 2016. Her husband, Ronald, felt that Cox's actions had indirectly contributed to her death. As her grief over losing Angie had weakened her health and will to live, ultimately leading to her passing. For Earl, his sentence was more than just the initial verdict. Authorities re-examined a previous case of sexual abuse involving two 7-year-old girls, for which Earl had initially received a lenient sentence. At that time, he had only spent 1 year in prison for violating his parole. However, years later, investigators contacted one of his victims, now an adult, and asked for her testimony against him. Faced with the of a life sentence, Earl chose to plead guilty and as a result, received an additional 10-year prison sentence. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Zoe Sarnaki. Zoe Sarnaki was born on March 25, 1991, in Portland, Maine, a city in the northwest of the United States. She was raised in a loving family consisting of her parents, John and Linda Sarnaki, her brother Gregory, and 2 half-sisters, with whom she still maintains a close relationship. Zoe's father, John, worked as a construction worker and provided well for the family. As a result, Zoe was exposed to a variety of creative activities from a young age, which led to her strong interest in art. Her family also loved animals and had 5 cats at home. As Zoe grew older, she became increasingly curious and developed a strong desire to travel and experience different cultures. She also adopted a vegan lifestyle, choosing to consume only plant-based foods and avoiding animal products. Zoe was raised in an ecologically conscious culture that prioritized animal welfare, environmental conservation, and healthy living. This culture played a major role in shaping her personality. By the time she started high school in 2005, Zoe had already built up a large group of friends who considered her to be cheerful, enthusiastic, and friendly. However, things changed in 2008 when Zoe made a shocking decision on her 17th birthday. She decided to drop out of school. Her friends and family were surprised by the decision, and her parents were particularly unhappy with her choice. Despite this sudden change, Zoe's former classmates remember her fondly, describing her as a kind and loving person. A few months after leaving school, Zoe found a job at a local bakery and cafe called Bagel Works, marking the beginning of a new chapter in her life. On March 25, 2009, Zoe's 18th birthday, she was looking forward to getting a tattoo on one of her arms. Inspired by the works of Austrian artist Gustav Klimt, she had a clear idea of the design she wanted. Zoe went to a tattoo parlor in the Old Port area. There, she met 27-year-old tattoo artist Chad Gurney. They quickly formed a bond, and after just a few days of meeting, Zoe agreed to start a romantic relationship with him. Notably, their 9-year age gap did not stop her from pursuing a relationship with Chad. Chad had a unique background. Born and raised in Maine, he attended Wells High School, where he was known as the goalie for lacrosse, a competitive sport played between 2 teams using a small rubber ball and a long-handled stick. After graduating from high school, Chad moved to Lynchburg, Virginia, to attend Liberty University, an institution known for its ties to the famous evangelical pastor Jerry Falwell. Chad has many tattoos on his body, most of which depict aliens. One design stands out, a gray alligator tattoo. In the context of tattoos, alien designs can mean 2 things. One is that the person believes in the existence of beings from other planets, and 2 is that it reflects the personality of the person wearing the tattoo, who is trying to say that they do not fit into this world, that they are different from others, and that they are unique. As for the reptile tattoo, it is said to symbolize danger and hostility, a predator to be avoided. Before moving to Portland in 2005, Chad had a difficult time recovering from a near-fatal car accident in Alabama that had occurred 4 years earlier. On a trip to a lacrosse game, a local van carrying players and coaches was hit from behind by a car and pushed into the oncoming lane, where it collided with a large truck. The impact threw Chad from the van and he nearly lost his leg. He has undergone approximately 20 surgeries due to severe head injuries. Chad underwent a psychiatric evaluation following his accident, which revealed that he had cognitive impairments. These impairments affected his speech, memory, and mathematical reasoning. After the accident, Chad received a large settlement from a lawsuit, allowing him to become financially independent. Years later, in 2007, Chad sought treatment for anxiety and depression. He was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and organic personality disorder. In 2009, Chad traveled to Hawaii alone, where he met Zoe. Chad and Zoe began dating and decided to have an open relationship, which meant they were free to see other people. After starting their relationship, Chad continued to travel. In May 2009, he took a weekend trip to Vancouver, a city in Canada. When Chad returned to Portland, Zoe confessed to him remorsefully that while he was away, she had had an affair with another man and had sex with him. At first, Chad did not seem to mind the affair, as they had previously agreed to maintain an open relationship. However, after this confession, Chad changed and began to insist that Zoe quit her job and go with him to Thailand. Zoe refused him, not knowing the devastating consequences that would follow. On May 25, 2009, Zoe came to Chad's apartment and took a nap because she was tired. While she was sleeping, Chad violently attacked her. He grabbed her by the neck, hit her in the head, and strangled her until she died. After Zoe died, Chad continued to commit crimes, including having sex with her body and then decapitating her. After committing the crime, Chad showered, dressed and drove to a nearby gas station to fill up the tank, showing a disturbing calmness after committing such a heinous act. Chad returned to his apartment, where he poured petrol over Zoe, creating a trail of fuel leading to the front door. He then set it on fire. Before the fire spread throughout the apartment, Chad quickly grabbed a backpack filled with items for his trip to Thailand, a laptop and a handgun. After the apartment was completely engulfed, Chad went to an ATM to withdraw cash and then checked into the Old Orchard Beach Motel, where he relaxed in the hot tub. A 911 call was made and emergency services were alerted to the fire at Chad's apartment. Police arrived quickly on the scene and extinguished the fire. Upon entering the building, they discovered a horrific scene. Inside the charred ruins of the apartment was a badly burned body surrounded by crosses and other religious objects. A neighbor called Chad to report that his house was on fire. Chad replied that he was out of town, headed to his hometown of Lewiston, and quickly ended the call. 2 days later, on May 26, Chad spoke to his best friend and confessed to killing Zoe, calmly explaining the events that led up to it. He appeared rational, claiming that he was exhausted from the pain and had lost control of himself. While driving through the streets of Portland, Chad carelessly ran a red light and was pulled over by a city police officer. During the stop, Chad claimed that a previous accident in 2005 had left him with mental health issues, and he asked his friend to explain this to the police over the phone. After a conversation with his friend and the police, Chad voluntarily went to the police station and confessed to Zoe's murder. The police then seized his belongings. A forensic examination of Chad's computer discovered a video of the gruesome scene on his hard drive, titled "Woman Half Decapitated Over Suspicion of Adultery." At least if she cheated, she wouldn't do it again. This incriminating evidence was later presented to the court. On Wednesday, May 27th, Zoe's high school held a moment of silence during class to honor her. Before lunch, teachers and students were informed of the tragic incident. Later that day, Christine Koo, Zoe's half-sister, issued a statement to local media on behalf of the family. She stressed that this was no ordinary murder, as the perpetrator, Chad, had committed many heinous acts. Christine reported that the police had informed her of the shocking events surrounding Zoe's murder. According to them, Chad had brutally attacked Zoe in a fit of rage, sexually assaulted her, and then set her body on fire. He then calmly went to a motel and got into a hot tub. A week after Zoe's tragic death, on June 2, 2009, a vigil was held in front of Chad's former apartment building. The vigil served as a moment of comfort for Zoe's loved ones and friends. Many strangers, shocked and outraged by the brutal crime, attended. It is estimated that more than 150 people attended the vigil and memorial service for Zoe. Candles and flowers were placed on the steps of the building where her life was tragically ended in memory of Zoe. Zoe's father, John, and her half-sister, Courtney, attended the vigil and were deeply moved by the outpouring of support from so many people. During the investigation, police interviewed Chad's friends and acquaintances, who said he was on a spiritual quest and had plans to travel to Thailand to study Eastern religions. His apartment was said to be decorated with many spiritual artifacts and symbols. Chad's personality seemed to be a mixture of contradictions. On the one hand, He was known to be kind and charming, often giving small gifts to those around him. He also expressed a desire to use the money he received from an accident to help humanity. However, Chad also had a harder side, with tattoos on his arms and a reputation for provocative and confrontational behavior. Those who knew Chad noted that his behavior often pushed people away. Robert Collins, a 24-year-old chef who knew Chad, recalled that people would often ignore him and turn away when Chad came to parties. Chad also confided to Robert that the only thing he truly sympathized with was pain, which was further emphasized by the word pain tattooed on his knuckles. Police and prosecutors have made great efforts to gather every piece of information about this brutal crime. Steve Weir, who rented an apartment from Chad in 2006, was also questioned. He mentioned religious paintings and artifacts in Chad's apartment and said Chad told him he was interested in theology but did not practice it. Watson Atkinson, a tattoo parlor owner in Portland, recalled a conversation with Chad in which Chad shared his plans to use his accident compensation to find direction in his life. However, Watson's impression of Chad was disturbing because Chad seemed to focus on teenage girls, which worried him so much that he forbade his 16-year-old daughter from communicating with Chad, and also repeatedly warned Zoe to stay away from him. An investigation into Chad's background revealed his medical history and mental health diagnoses, but subsequent evaluations by multiple psychologists during his incarceration found no evidence of delusions or hallucinations. In conversations with professionals, Chad expressed strong emotions related to his perception of Zoe's infidelity, which he claimed had frustrated him. According to court documents, he claimed that he was fed up with all his girlfriend's infidelity. He began thinking about killing Zoe when she confessed her infidelity to him. As the trial began, a 127-minute tape of the police interview was played. The tape was recorded 12 hours after the crime and featured Chad speaking to Denham police. In the recording, Chad described his relationship with Zoe as extremely close, with Zoe sometimes staying at his apartment for up to a week. He denied any history of fighting between them and believed they were destined for each other. Chad also admitted to taking Zoe's life, describing her as the most beautiful girl he had ever met and feeling he had a responsibility to tell the truth about what had happened. During his conversation with the police, Chad remained calm and apologized frequently, breaking down in tears several times. He recounted the events of May 25, 2009, saying that Zoe was napping. Chad said that he approached her and began to strangle her, causing Zoe to defend herself and scream for him to stop. According to Chad, when Zoe resisted, he hit her in the head and continued to strangle her until she lost consciousness and stopped breathing. He then detailed the next terrifying actions he performed on her body. Chad revised his testimony, saying that he used 3 knives instead of a samurai sword. He described how he placed a cross between his legs and recounted his actions while Zoe's body burned in the apartment. Chad called himself a terrible person. When questioned about the beheading, Chad claimed that he was trying to turn Zoe's death into a ritual of forgiveness. Chad said he felt haunted on the day of the murder and that everything in his life seemed to have gone dark. He described himself as a primitive person, acting on instinct for hours, which led him to commit the heinous act. The recording of the interrogation, which became key evidence in Cumberland County Superior Court, was heard in its entirety by Judge Roland Cole during the first trial. It was revealed that Chad faced serious consequences, at least 25 years in prison, or possibly life in prison. However, if his mental disorder was recognized, he could be sent to a psychiatric facility in Austin. During the 2011 trial, it was determined that Chad had strangled the victim in a fit of rage. The question remains whether Chad would agree to this testimony, since he had waived his right to a jury trial. Prosecutors argued that Chad, a former Liberty University student and lacrosse champion, was fully aware of his actions. To support this claim, they presented testimony from a psychiatrist and a psychologist, both of whom agreed that Chad understood the gravity of his actions and decided to violently kill his girlfriend. Chad's defense team continued to emphasize his mental health struggles, arguing that he was out of control. On January 11, 2012, Chad's attorneys filed a motion with the Supreme Court to exclude from the case evidence found on Chad's personal computer at the time of his arrest. This evidence included a gruesome video in which he demonstrated how to decapitate an unfaithful woman. The defense argued that the video was inadmissible as evidence. Ultimately, nearly 3 years after the crime, Chad Gurney, then 30, was sentenced to 50 years in prison for the murder of Zoe Sarnaki and an additional 25 years for arson. The judge ruled that the sentences would run consecutively. Chad's lawyers challenged the sentence, but their appeal was rejected. Zoe's family members were disappointed that Chad did not receive a life sentence. During sentencing, the presiding judge said that Chad had a distorted view of the world, but the court's main concern was whether the defendant knew that his actions were wrong. Chad's lawyer, Sarah Churchill, presented her case to the Supreme Court, claiming that Chad's concussion and other injuries from the 2005 accident had left her client in a state of confusion and delusion. She argued that the judge erred in finding Chad guilty, particularly that the search warrant should not have included his smartphone, laptop, and social media pages. Sarah Churchill argued that the court should have focused more on evidence of Chad's psychosis and unstable mental state at the time of the crime, rather than evidence found on his digital devices. The Deputy Attorney General told the court that Chad was accused of killing Zoe as an act of revenge for having an affair with another man. The Deputy Attorney General explained that a video appeared to show Chad sexually assaulting Zoe as punishment for an infidelity that he considered a betrayal. The Deputy Attorney General clarified that the prosecution did not use any information from social media to build its case against Chad. He argued that the evidence convincingly demonstrated that the defendant was fully aware of his actions at the time of the crime. After the verdict was announced, Kathy Kozev, Zoe's aunt, shared with reporters that throughout the trial she felt extremely distressed as she witnessed Chad's sight and voice, taking her back to the traumatic final moments of her niece's life.